Hello everybody and welcome back to my Modern Masters 3 review. Today I'm going to be going over the green and white commons and uncommons and trying to explain a little bit about the archetypes here and what cards you should pick highly, what cards you should kind of pass on. So green and white are involved in a huge swath of the archetypes here. White can reach anywhere from Esper Control to Blue-White Blink to White-Green Populate to Naya tokens. And green has very similar range, but also minus the Esper Control part. And White-Blue Blink, it's adding on green-red sort of aggro go wide and Jund sacrifice. So again, every color in the set has 5 archetypes that it fits with. Its allied color pairs, the shard that it belongs to, like Bant. That's one I guess I forgot to mention. Bant splicers is a sort of thing here. And the 2 shards sort of adjacent to it, right? So white has Esper, Bant, and Naya, along with Azorius and Selesnya, and similarly for green. And some of these cards are going to fit into certain archetypes fairly well, and other ones are going to get passed on by the other archetypes. And knowing what should come late to you and what cards should hopefully form the basis of whatever archetype you're in, because no one else is going to be interested in them and you're going to be able to pick them up 10th or 11th or 12th pick, I think is going to be pretty important in figuring out how you draft this set. So let's just go into the cards here. Actually, let me give a short overview first of green and white and sort of the strengths and weaknesses at the common slot. One of the things that I've talked about a lot in this set review is the presence of 2-drops and sort of this conflict between you wanting to play signets on turn 2 and then ramp into something on turn 4 versus you playing turn 2 plays and trying to go after your opponent earlier. And in the past set reviews, I noted that red had a lot of really strong 2-drops, but that blue and black were kind of lacking. And so for blue and black, they were going to need to draft signets much more highly and then ramp up to their 4 slot where they had a lot of strength. Here we see kind of an interesting thing with green and white where they're a little bit they're sort of more balanced between those two points, where there are 2-drops that you're going to want to play that are reasonably good. Core Skyfisher, Lone Missionary, Youthful Knight, Call of the Conclave, perhaps Deputy of Acquittals just as a bear. I suppose he counts. He has more value later on. And then in green, you're looking at things like Deathhood Cobra. You could ramp with Explore, which I'll talk about a little bit about later. Kind of it's a way of replacing signets, I suppose. And then you have, I wouldn't really count Seal of Primordium, but Sylvan Ranger, Burning Tree Emissary, and Coiling Oracle, in addition, of course, to Call the Conclave, which is a share between them. So you have a decent number of 2-drops, and what you're really lacking, I think, at the common slot is good 4-drop slot to ramp into. Green is one of the best in the entire format with Penumbra Spider, which just seems like it shuts down so many things that other people are trying to do in this format. But that's pretty much it. It's literally the only 4-drop that they have at common. And then if we go to white, it's a kind of similar story here. They have Eyes in the Skies and Aethertoe as their only 2 commons at the 4-drop slot, and neither of them is something I really want to ramp into off of signets. Eyes in the Skies is just going to give me 2 1/1 bird tokens, right? Because if I'm playing it off of a signet on turn 3, that's all I'm going to get. And it's a little bit surprising. So it seems, in a sense, a little bit weak. And I think really the point I want to make about white and green is that a lot of their strength and a lot of the cards that you're going to need to draft a successful green-white deck or anything kind of base green or white are going to be in the uncommon slot. Here with white, we see a lot of really powerful cards. Path to Exile, of course, just being top tier first pickable removal. Lingering Souls, which is just a savage beating in any limited format, really. Flicker Wisp, which makes a lot of these archetypes work with the blink effect. Intangible Virtue, if you're going tokens. Some fairly powerful cards. Master Splicer, I think, is going to be one of the big ones that you're going to want to get in any sort of splicing strategy. Great 4-drop as well, along with Bronzebeak Moa. Bronzebeak Moa is going to be pretty powerful when you're playing it on turn 3 and then swinging in with it as like a 8/8, right, the next turn. And then, of course, the tricolor cards, so the shard cards are all pretty strong. Woolly Thoktar, Rox Warmonk, Tower Gargoyle. Wayfaring Temple is also pretty strong. If you're able to ramp to this fairly early, get this out while your opponent doesn't really have a good way of blocking it, you can start populating some stuff, right? You play Wayfaring Temple turn 3, Master Splicer turn 4, and then you attack with the Wayfaring Temple, which is already a 3/3, and either your opponent blocks or you're going to get an extra, essentially a 4/4, counting the Anthem effect from the Master Splicer. So there's kind of an interesting tension here where the 2-drops are not as great as they were in red, but you're also kind of lacking at things to do at the 4-drop slot, at least at common. And I think a lot of what's going to come down to getting successful green and white decks is going to come at the uncommon slot and picking up a lot of really good uncommons. So let me kind of deep dive into the cards now and discuss what cards are strong, what cards are weak, what cards I expect to have go late, and ultimately, I think if you're going to go green-white populate, right, as that specific strategy, one of the things that I'm going to note is that there aren't a lot of great token-creating effects at common. Call the Conclave is probably the one you're going to want to see the most, and hopefully because it's a green-white casting cost, you're going to see it a lot. But a lot of the rest of them are not really that impressive, right? I have Attended Knight. That's a 1/1 white soldier token. Okay, I don't really want to populate just to get 1/1 white soldier tokens. Eyes in the Skies. This is a 1/1 white bird flying. Sensor Splicer is 4 power and toughness for 5 mana. I don't know if I really like this guy that much. He does give me a token though, which is going to be pretty big, and that's pretty much it, right? At white, the most we see is really Call the Conclave. There aren't a lot of cards that are creating tokens for you here. And if we go to green, it's kind of the same story, right? Fists of Ironwood will create me some 1/1s. Okay, I guess. I can count, well, Call the Conclave shows up here as well. But I could count Giant Baiting, right? 4/4 Giant Warrior tokens, but those will get exiled at the beginning of the next instep. And if you populate, that populate token will also get exiled, right? The best are probably Penumbra Spider, and which is just fantastic by itself. When it dies, it creates a 2/4 black spider creature token with reach. That's excellent. And Slime Molding, but I don't know if Slime Molding is really what you want. I think you're going to have to pick it up a fair number of times just to make sure that you have enough synergy with your populate strategy. And if you have some populate cards, I actually wouldn't mind playing this just for 5 mana as a 4/4. But I'm really trying to emphasize that besides Call the Conclave, right, which you really don't want to have to be fighting with someone else at the table to get, because I think this is going to be your bread and butter. This is what you're going to need to get a lot of as this green-white strategy. There aren't a lot of great tokens to populate at the common slot, which means a lot of these cards like Druid's Deliverance or Sundering Growth, or in white, things like Wake the Reflections or Eyes in the Skies, they could be potentially of very limited usefulness. And if the populate strategy isn't getting off the ground, that also means that perhaps cards like Intangible Virtue are not going to be that great for you, right? The Intangible Virtue has the bonus that creating 1/1 tokens is fine with it, but it is weaker in a format where the populate strategy isn't quite getting there. And though they say that sort of Bant Splicers is one of the archetypes, you'll note that really the only Splicer at common in this entire green and white is Sensor Splicer. In fact, I think the blue Splicer is also uncommon. So you've only got one Splicer that really is supposed to hold up the entire archetype at common, and everything else is at uncommon. So I feel like one of the things you're going to want to note is that the basis of a good green-white deck is going to be at the uncommon slot, getting a lot of those good uncommons. And one of the things I want to note is that I think a lot of these uncommons are going to be fought over by a lot of different archetypes. So I'm a little bit wary of drafting just straight green-white in particular. And I'm a little bit more fond of, say, blue-white Blink or blue-black Control, ultimately as how I shake up on this format. But in any case, let me go into the individual cards and discuss them, and hopefully it'll become a little bit clearer. So first up, Gideon's Lawkeeper. I talked earlier in the red review about Thundersong Trumpeter and how I wasn't very impressed with it. Gideon's Lawkeeper I am impressed with, because the shortfall of Thundersong Trumpeter, which is that it only stops attacking or blocking for one turn, right? Or kind of one half of a cycle, right? Either you're stopping them from attacking on their turn, or you're stopping them from blocking on your turn, but you can't do both, so they're going to get to do one of them effectively. You don't have that same problem with Gideon's Lawkeeper. You can tap down their guy before attackers are declared, and then he's tapped down on their turn, and he's tapped down on the entirety of your turn. And you can also do things where if your opponent can't really attack in, right, you can wait, and then you have the opportunity to tap down a creature at the end of their turn, tap another creature at the start of your turn, and stop two of their guys from being able to do anything, right? So you can kind of go in for an alpha strike with this guy. You can't accomplish the same thing with the Thundersong Trumpeter. Additionally, because Gideon's Lawkeeper is only one color, you're able to put him in a lot more decks, and I think this guy's going to be a pretty valuable pickup. This is one of the better tappers that you're going to see in any limited environment, and I think that he's going to have usefulness here because there aren't a lot of things that'll just incidentally kill him. Off the top of my head, things like Cower in Fear, Vithian Stinger, and Pyroclasm are sort of the three that you want to worry about. But most of the rest of the removal in this format is single target, right? It's things like Path to Exile, right? It's things like Augur Spree. It's things like Magma Jet. And so there's a decent chance that against a lot of decks, this guy is going to be able to survive. And the ability to just tap target creature, I think, is going to be relevant almost no matter what you're facing off against. As long as they don't have a way to efficiently kill this guy, I think you're going to get pretty good value. I'm fine having this guy just tap down a golem, right, from one of the splicers. I'm fine having this guy just tap down, some random 3/3 from one of the go wide decks. If that's what he's trading for, is just a 3/3 for 1 mana, that's a pretty good deal. And the ability for him to have more upside to tap down your opponent's 4/4 flyers and things of that sort, I think is going to be very powerful. So I expect this guy to go pretty early. And this is the card I definitely want to see if I find Ranger of Eos, right? If I find Ranger of Eos at the rare slot, then this is the sort of 1-drop that I'm going to want. There aren't a lot of other 1-drops in this format that I think are particularly strong. And in part, that's because 1-drops themselves are often weak in limited environments, but also because they need to justify you doing that on turn 1, right? There are going to be a lot of scenarios where you have a tap land, whether it's a Guild Gate or a Tri-land, on turn 1, and the cost of playing this guy on turn 1 is going to be having to play your tap land later, and that means you're giving up some 2-drop or some 3-drop in order to play this guy, or you're playing him later and he might not fit into where you're trying to curve out. There's sort of a problem with a lot of these 1-drops that you're not really going to get them out efficiently on turn 1. It's not like these 1-drops, as they might in other formats, allow you to make use of that mana that you just otherwise wouldn't, that you're kind of getting them out for free tempo-wise. I think the freeness from a tempo perspective of these 1-drops is going to be questionable, and as a result, I'm going to value them all a little bit lower. But Gideon's Lawkeeper is one of the ones that I'm actually going to continue. I'm going to draft it fairly highly, unlike pretty much all the other 1-drops, because Gideon's Lawkeeper is useful, whereas a lot of the other 1-drops aren't that useful. And I'm kind of fine not playing this guy on turn 1. Also, he's not something I'm looking to really beat down a lot with or do anything like that. Like, I'm fine if I play Gideon's Lawkeeper on turn 5, and then I'm starting to use him to tap down whatever my opponent's big stuff is, because that's where he's really going to get usefulness, is when I have that spare mana up. So even if I'm not getting really the tempo out of him, because I can't play him on turn 1, where otherwise I would have done nothing, because my lands are coming into play untapped, or coming into play tapped, still, this effect is really great. There are a lot of cube formats, for example, where this guy would be a pretty high pick too. I think he's going to be a high pick here. Draft him pretty highly, and I think pretty much all of the archetypes are going to have a use for him. Defensive archetypes are going to be fine with this guy because he's going to tap down your opponent's attackers and stop them from getting in at you. The aggressive archetypes are going to like this guy because he's going to tap down the blockers, right? He's sort of like a removal spell. And that last point about him being sort of like a removal spell is going to be pretty important because unlike red and black, which had a lot of removal, you're actually a little bit short on removal when it comes to these other colors. Pitfall Trap is one of your options. Aether Toe, to some extent, is going to be pretty good, and you might like this in your sort of Bant decks especially. But that's effectively it at the common slot here. And if we go to green, there's not a lot of other removal here as well. I mean, I guess your best bet is something like Arachnus Web. And that's it, really. And even when you go to the uncommon slot in these colors, I have Path to Exile, which is nice. But what else? Banishing Stroke. Not all decks might be able to use Banishing Stroke particularly well. I go to green. I'm going to see Putrefy, and that's only if I'm Jund, really, and not a whole lot else. So there's a lot of problems with these colors, in that the lack of removal can get problematic. There are going to be creatures that you're going to want to have an answer to, and some of them are going to be very frustrating for you to play against, like Vithian Stinger in red. Well, Vithian Stinger isn't going to attack in for Pitfall Trap or Aether Toe, right? It's just going to sit back and ping. You don't have any way of dealing with a pinger here at common in white, right? And likewise in green, do I want to use a Putrefy on a Vithian Stinger? That doesn't feel all that great, right? So there are some issues. I think if you want really good removal, you're going to want to splash into red, get something like Ground Assault, or from red, Magma Jet and a lot of its other good removal. So I feel like you're going to want to splash another color just to get the extra removal there, or have some answer. And in white, Gideon's Lawkeeper's ability to kind of act as removal is going to be pretty strong. Now, of course, this guy is not good against Vithian Stinger, but against a lot of other stuff, he's gonna shore up what you have, and I like him a lot for that reason as well. Soul Warden, against an aggressive strategy, I think this guy is going to be all right. Right, she's going to provide you a lot of life gain and kind of get you there against these decks that are looking to go more aggressive, right? But I don't know if this is really more than a sideboard card, because against a lot of decks as well, you're just not really going to get any value out of her. If you go up against a blue-black control deck, for example, they're really not going to care about getting your life total down. You know, you could have your life total start at 40, and they probably wouldn't care. Their win condition is that they're going to start doing disgusting things with mystical teachings and just get such huge card advantage against you that it doesn't really matter what your life total is. At the end of the day, they're going to have a 4/4 beating on your head, and if it takes an extra 3 or 4 turns for that 4/4 to get there and kill you, they're not really going to care. So, not really big on 1-drops, not big on Soul Warden. I think it's a good sideboard card against a lot of the more aggressive strategies, but I feel like this format's going to already be a little bit slow. So I'm really not looking for this card in a big way. I think the one thing that might make me more interested in this, and perhaps even make it something that I want to main deck, is Ranger of Eos, of course, right? Because Ranger of Eos is on color, and that means that I can just basically have this as something that I tutor for with my Ranger of Eos whenever I go up against an aggressive matchup, and it's possible that if I'm not up against an aggressive matchup, I just take this out. But also it means that even against matchups where they're looking to get card advantage against me, Ranger of Eos just having more targets, being able to hit 2 things is going to be pretty important, right? If I can put down 3 bodies for just 6 mana, let's say, right? I cast the Ranger, I cast the 2 1-drops. Some control decks are going to have to spend a lot of resources getting rid of that, and that could be pretty good. But other than that, other than drafting that 1 card, or I bring it in from the sideboard against an aggressive deck, I'm really not looking for 1-drops. I'm really not looking for this effect. So I'm kind of low on Soul Warden, and hopefully this is just something you get to pick up as a one of, and stash it in your sideboard and bring it in against matchups where you're going to have problems keeping your life total high. Wake the Reflections. I talked a little bit earlier about how it's difficult to find good tokens. Wake the Reflections really suffers under those circumstances. If you don't have good token generators, then this populate effect is not going to be that good. It's at sorcery speed, which is a lot less useful than having it instant speed. And it's nice if you can play this and even just get an extra Call of the Conclave token, but you kind of have to... Is that a strong enough effect to make up for all the times where this Wake the Reflections is just going to be dead in your hand because you don't have anything to populate? Or worse, you Wake the Reflections, but your opponent is able to remove the token that you wanted to populate before this resolves. You're going to have some problems there. So I don't like that it isn't an instant speed. I don't like that it's really parasitic, and it's part of the sort of the half of the synergy that's really too abundant. I feel like you're really going to want to be focusing, if you want to make a lot of tokens and take advantage of this populate, you want to get the token makers first. You want to get the Call of the Conclaves. You want to get the Penumbra Spiders. You want to even maybe take Slime Moldings. Or at the uncommon slot, you want to take things like Herbis Protector, right? 4/4 flying token. You need to get something like splicers, whatever, and there's a lot of them, so you have a decent chance. But if you don't have that, don't pick this up, and expect that this is just going to be something that if you get there with finding the tokens, this is going to be something that's just going to come to you for free. None of the other archetypes are really going to... If you're getting all the token generators at the table, these things are going to come to you for free. You're not going to have to use any picks on them. You're going to have as many of them as you want. And if someone's drafting these, I don't know, maybe you have some issues. Maybe someone's just drafting poorly, because I don't think you want to draft these very highly, even if you're in this archetype. There are probably other better populate effects, which I'll go over later. But this card is just not very good. Don't draft it highly. Hope to be able to pick up like 2 or 3 of them to round out your deck just for free whenever you get the token generators. But otherwise, pass on this. Graceful Reprieve. This is sort of more the Bant blinking type strategy. I really don't like this card for a lot of reasons, though. I'm going to compare it very negatively to Momentary Blink. Because, for one, my creature does need to die, which sometimes isn't something that I control that well. It's just going to be difficult sometimes to get my splicers killed. Unless I kind of just throw them in combat for, no reason, essentially. And I could get blown out in the sense that if I try and Graceful Reprieve something that's going to, say, trade, right? I send in a 2/2 into an opponent's 2/2, or I block with it, and then I try to Graceful Reprieve, and they just have a removal spell. Well, my 2/2 didn't trade for what they had, and I wasn't able to get the Graceful Reprieve effect. I just got 2 for 1 pretty easily. There's a lot of instant speed removal in this format, so I'm kind of shaky on that. It is a nice effect, but if I'm really thinking about it, I kind of like things like Momentary Blink more. The downside of Momentary Blink, of course, is that I can't trade my guy in combat and still get the enter the battlefield effect again, which I can do with Graceful Reprieve. But to have the flashback and also just have the ability to do this whenever, right? When my opponent's tapped out, I can get this when my opponent is declaring attackers and I want to create a surprise blocker. I can do this. That's a very important effect, which I can't get with Graceful Reprieve. I can't just Momentary Blink a Splicer, for example, get an extra golem on the board and then kill what they were attacking with the golem, because I have to wait for the thing to die, and that's that's going to mean that I don't have it there for when I'm declaring blockers. So I'm much more excited about Momentary Blink as one of these blink effects, and not very much on Graceful Reprieve. I think this card is not very good. I think hopefully you're just going to get these for free in any sort of blink into the battlefield archetype. But even then, you're probably not... This is going to be like your 23rd card. You're not going to be very happy running these. So I think this is mostly just chaff that you're not very interested in. Core Skyfisher. Core Skyfisher I think is great. It's usually a 2-mana 2/3 that you kind of get to... 2-mana 2/3 flyer that you get to pay on an installment plan. Goes fairly well with your 1-drops and stuff like that, but the downside, of course, of kind of having to return a permanent you control to your owner's hand is not that big of a one when you're in any sort of blink strategy, right? This is something that you're going to be able to do pretty regularly, and I don't even mind sometimes just bouncing a land, right, or a signet or something like this. This guy is just a really efficient creature a lot of the time. And a 2/3 flyer, I think, is roughly where you want to be with power and toughness as a flyer, because there are a lot of 2/2 flyers in this format. There's a lot of things that you're going to be able to kill on blocking or get through on attacking with this body. And so I really like this guy. Blinking, of course, bouncing a creature to your hand can be very valuable. I certainly want to bounce things like the Urbis Protector, or bounce a Splicer, right? So it has sort of the same issue with a lot of these populate cards, that you want to find the payoffs as well. But I think ultimately there are going to be more payoffs for bouncing something than there are going to be for populating, right? Because bouncing can apply to pretty much any creature with an enter the battlefield effect. The populate only applies to tokens, and I want kind of big tokens if I do that. If I play Core Skyfisher, I'm fine bouncing just a lone missionary, right? I'm probably fine bouncing a Core Hookmaster, right? A lot of these creatures just have strong enter the battlefield effects. To be able to reuse them, right? Like, I have a turn where I play Core Hookmaster. I get to swing it with my guys. Their guy doesn't get to untap. Next turn, I Core Skyfisher back the Hookmaster, replay the Hookmaster, tap down more of their stuff, get to swing in again. This guy is nice and aggressive. He stops a lot of the aggressive starts where they ultimately have to attack you with 2/2s and stuff like they've played on turn 2. I think this guy's really good. I'm going to draft him pretty highly. I think he fits in a lot of these strategies because Um, Obviously, he fits in blue white blink very strongly, but also I think he's going to fit pretty well into a populate strategy because a lot of the things that you want to populate are going to be splicers, right? To kind of get there with that populate strategy, I think you're going to need to find some number of splicers and Urbis protectors and things of this sort. And in that case, I like this guy a lot if you're able to find those. So, Core Skyfisher, I rate this guy pretty highly. I think, again, in the 2-drop slot, you've got a lot of competition because you want to play Signets a lot of the time. But given that there aren't a lot of great 4-drops here, I'm perfectly fine having this guy. And even with a deck that has Signets, I'm kind of fine running this guy because I just think he's that powerful of a 2-drop. Lone Missionary, a 2-1 for 2 is decent to gain 4 life when it enters the battlefield, is also very strong, works well with your blink strategies. This is something unlike Soul Warden. This is sort of a life gain effect that I would main deck because, simply put, a 2-1 for 2 is just a lot more useful than a 1-1 for 1, right? So even if these two guys, say, gain the same amount of life over time and die to the same things effectively, a 2-1 can trade up. It can trade with a 2-drop of some sort, right? This blocks and kills a Burning Tree Emissary. This right can attack in and put my opponent on a clock, whereas the 1-1 is a much slower clock. It's half as fast. So I like this guy. I'm not looking to draft him really highly. Again, he is just a 2-1, and I think this format is one where life gain is not going to be super relevant. But if you don't have Signets, this is something that you want to be drafting fairly highly. And given the somewhat weak nature of the rest of your 2-drop slot, not super weak, it's not like blue and black, but given that sort of softness, like you might not be able to find Call of the Conclaves because I feel like a lot of people are going to be drafting these pretty highly. This guy is pretty good, I think. I would take him. Momentary Blink. I talked earlier about how I like this card a lot better than Graceful Reprieve. I still don't really like this card, though. You do need to get there with the Blink strategy, and you also do need to be, I think, blue-white to really take advantage of this, although you could just be green-white splashing the blue because, paying this on splashback costs, by the time you're interested in doing that, you've probably got a lot of looks at an island or some sort of blue source, so, you can be green-white just with a little splash of blue to make this work. But I don't know. Part of the issue is that I'm not sure a lot of these enter the battlefield effects are really worth just 2 mana, right? If I'm blinking an Attended Knight, I'm getting a 1/1 token. If I'm blinking a Hookmaster, right, this is okay. Blinking a Sensor Splicer works out pretty decent, but I feel like this is a card you're going to be able to get relatively late, right? And it's also a card that we already see another effect of this in the format with Ghostly Flicker, and I think this is kind of comparable to Ghostly Flicker. The fact that Ghostly Flicker costs 3 mana is kind of a big deal because a lot of times you're not going to have a board where you want to blink 2 creatures, and a lot of times you're going to want to use this in response to removal, right, to get your guy out of harm's way. And keeping 3 mana up for Ghostly Flicker, especially when you have to use it when you don't have 2 creatures to blink, you're just blinking one of them to prevent them from dying to removal, could be tricky. That said, when you do get there and you do have things that you want to blink, I think there's actually a reasonably good shot that you're going to put this in your deck. Unlike cards that I just don't want to have in my deck, like Graceful Reprieve, right? I'm really kind of uncomfortable having this in the slot. If I do get there with the archetype, I'm going to want these, and I'm going to take them. They're not going to be just like my 23rd begrudging card. They're going to be not, stellar cards. This isn't the first card I put in my deck, but it's going to be decently high up there. So I do think that you want some of these usually in your deck if you've gotten there in the blink thing. And I don't know. That, again, I think you want to get there first, though. You want to have the good blink targets. That's what's going to be more important. You're going to want to have the good token generators that you can blink. You're going to want those pieces of the puzzle before you're drafting things like this, because these cards are just useless to people who haven't done that, right? And if you're the guy who does that and no one else at the table is able to do that because you're grabbing all that stuff, I think this is going to be really good. And it doesn't necessarily need to be token generators. I mean, this is a pretty flexible card in that sense. You could be getting Sin Collectors and things of this sort, right? But I think a lot of the best stuff to blink is going to be white, blue, green, white, blue, black. And yeah, I think get there first with finding the targets to blink, right? And then hope to pick this card up late. Don't draft it early. and I think you'll get there. Youthful Knight. This is a very unimpressive creature. I mean, a lot of the stuff has had a lot of text on it. This basically is just a 2/1 first strike for 2. But as I said, you are a little bit soft at this 2-drop slot, and a 2/1 first strike actually does a fairly decent job, right? This kills tokens most of the time. I mean, as long as they're not 3/3 tokens. This kills your lone missionaries, kills a lot of the other 2-drops in the format. I almost think of this guy as like a solid blocker. I'm not really sure he's that great on offense because eventually they're going to have, you don't want to attack into like an Augur of Bolus or a Seagate Oracle with this guy. But he's actually, I think, better than he looks. This is just a solid creature. You don't have to draft him very highly, but I think you're going to be able to get him reasonably late, and you're going to play him in a lot of your decks just because you want to shore up that 2-drop slot. I would prefer to have Signets, of course. I almost always I'm going to draft a Signet over this guy, no matter what the circumstances. But for not everyone can have Signets, right? There is going to be a lot of competition for them at the table, and if you don't happen to be the guy opening the Signets, then I think Youthful Knight is going to be a card that you're interested in, just for helping you curve out a little bit better. Deputy of Acquittals. I like that this guy is Flash. I think because he has Flash, he works a little bit better in the Esper deck, right? Where you're kind of looking to play more stuff at instant speed, because then you can reserve this guy. I think this guy has almost all the benefits of, say, Momentary Blink, Core Skyfisher, right? Like, to be able to play this guy at Flash is going to be really strong because it's going to protect your creatures against removal, right? Or it's going to let you chump block, but then bring the chump back to your hand. And just sometimes you can get them, right? You're willing to play this guy as just like an Ambush Viper to trade with a creature sometimes. I think, again, because you're playing him at Flash speed, he gains a lot more value in the deck that's looking to keep a lot of mana up on all of its turns. But it's really also very important that this is a May ability. So if you're in a creature-light deck, right, like Esper, where you might struggle to find good things to bounce back with Core Skyfisher, this guy still works, right? You can just play him as a 2/2. And, of course, it's not as good as a flying 2/3, but you're not setting back your land development in a deck where you just don't have other early creatures to play. And this guy still maintains a lot of his value if you're bouncing, say, a Dinrova Horde to replay it, right? This guy protects a lot of your threats in what could be a very threat-light archetype. I talked about this guy already when I reviewed Blue-Black, but I just wanted to kind of give a little reminder here. And, of course, he's still strong in Blue-White Blink, of course, and can be pretty strong in this Green-White Populate tokens deck, right? This is a reason to go Bant. If you're able to find the Splicers and the payoff cards, this guy, one of the guys that gets paid off. I would draft this reasonably highly if I know I'm in these colors, because I'm worried that other decks are going to take him, right? Even though he does have this somewhat restrictive mana cost. I think this guy is pretty solid, and I like him a lot. Sunring Growth. So I talked a little bit earlier about artifact destruction, especially in red, where I noted that there weren't really a lot of artifacts that you wanted to destroy besides Signets, and destroying a Signet was going to be a pretty big deal. But other than that, there weren't really a lot. There's Tower Gargoyle, and then there's really the Splicer Golems, right? Creates a 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature token. So I wasn't really big on main decking artifact removal, just because, if they didn't play a Signet that game, or maybe they don't even have a Signet in their deck because they didn't get lucky, this could just be a dead card. And so you wanted to keep cards like that, cards like Ancient Grudge more in the sideboard. But Sunring Growth also hits enchantments, and even just being able to pay 2 at instant speed to populate in a lot of these decks where I kind of get there with my token generation, I think it's going to be very valuable, right? I won't even care about the artifact or enchantment that I'm hitting. I mean, the downside, of course, is I do need to target an artifact or enchantment to use this. That's kind of one of the big downsides. But I feel like there are enough artifacts and enchantments in the format combined between the Splicer tokens, between the Signets, and then between the enchantments, right? Things like Intangible Virtue, right? Things like Unflinching Courage, right? Any of these, Madcap Skills, Gift of Orzhova, whatever. Things in green, there are a lot of really impactful enchantments there, like Gaia's Anthem, right? I want to get rid of Gaia's Anthem if I can. I want to get rid of Golgari Germination. This seems like really hard to play against, right? So there are a decent number of enchantments, Arachnus Web, maybe Fist of Ironwood. Fist of Ironwood at least gives me a target. there are a decent number of enchantments here that kind of shore up the numbers and makes me want to main deck this, right? They have the potential to, at instant speed, populate, is really strong. And again, it is only potential because you do have to target an artifact or enchantment, but a lot of times I'm willing, probably like later in the game, I'm willing to destroy my own signet to have this thing go off. If I'm able to copy, at instant speed, an Urbis Protector token, right? Or even just a Call of the Conclave token. If I'm able to get a 3/3 on the board at instant speed, that's going to catch a lot of my opponents off guard and allow me to win in combat, right? Especially if, I mean, in some decks, I'm going to Sundering Growth, I'm going to get an extra Call of the Conclave token, and the Growth itself is going to be targeting like a Gaia's Anthem or an Intangible Virtue, and then I just get to blow my opponent out in combat. So I think this card can be very strong. I know the mana cost looks a little bit restrictive, but interestingly, you could play this in an all-white or all-green deck. And I think there are enough targets. Once you include enchantments, I think there are enough targets that this is something I'm interested in main decking. And, there are going to be some games where I main deck it and it doesn't really do a whole lot, and I have to side it out. But I think in a lot more, it's going to get the job done. And so this is actually one of these effects that I'm willing to main deck because it's kind of got everything. It's got a breadth of targets, it's instant speed, and it populates. Yeah, I'm interested in this card, and I'm hoping these go late, and I'm willing to pick them up. In terms of the number that I want to have in my deck, I think having like one in the main and one in the sideboard might be what I'm kind of looking for. I don't want to... there are going to be some matchups where this card just doesn't do anything because I can't... Like, the only things I really get to target are my own signets or something like that. But, and that is, I guess, one thing to note. My value of this card actually goes up the more signets and enchantments of my own that I'm able to get. Because there are going to be some sort of corner case scenarios where I'm going to want to use this just for the instant speed populate, and I'm willing to destroy my own signet to get the job done. So I actually think this card is pretty good, and I am not looking to draft it highly because I'm hoping everyone else drafts it late, and so I get to pick up these late. But this is going to be definitely, when I'm 8th, 9th pick, I'm going to be picking up these, not just as solid sideboard cards, but actually potentially as main deck playables. Call the Conclave, kind of like an Agony Warp with blue-black, and perhaps, other things like Deputy Acquittals. These 2-drops that are shared colors, right, feel like just the bread and butter. You should want to get a lot of these, and you should draft these very highly, and if you see these going, that means the archetype is open. Right? This is the card that really is going to shore up your archetype here with Green-White Populate, because, again, there aren't a lot of great token generators. This one is great, right? This one is 2 mana, get a 3/3. That's really big game, right? The closest thing you get to that with an actual creature is something like Mog Flunkies, and of course Mog Flunkies has downside. This it has upside because it's a token. I mean, I guess it's a little bit less upside if the token gets bounced, but and that is sort of a risk here, but get the tokens, draft this very highly. If you know you're green-white, this is a pickup that you definitely want to grab. You don't want to let anyone else get it, because if anyone else gets it, they're going to start horning in on green and white as well. Cut them off. I feel like this is a card you need to make the archetype work in the same way that you kind of need a lot of Agony Warps to keep yourself alive as the blue-black deck. It's multicolored, but it's forming the basis of the archetype. I think you need to draft this pretty highly. I don't think you can really wait for it to wheel. And I think if you are able to cut people off of green-white, hopefully in the later packs, right, like pack 2, pack 3, you're going to start seeing these come to you 6th pick, 7th pick, and you're going to be paid off like that. But this is one of the cards you want to grab early, and if you're forcing the archetype really hard, and if you're not forced, like if this doesn't make it around the table, then I think someone else in there is going to be in this archetype, and you're going to just kind of want to avoid this. But I guess the ideal position is I'm already like part green, part white, something like this, and I see this going 5th pick, and I start grabbing these up, and I get past a lot of these, and I think the basis of a really strong green-white populate deck is going to have a lot of the Call of the Conclaves, because it's going to turn on all my other populate cards, all the other stuff that I'm trying to do, and I think this is a really great card. Pick it highly. Attended Knight. Attendant Knight doesn't really have super great synergy. I mean, it's not the strongest synergy with all the other effects. It creates a token, which is nice. It means at least when you're populating, you're getting a 1/1 soldier. It has some blink synergy, right? You're getting an extra 1/1 white soldier token. It helps you go wide a little bit, right? It's 2 bodies. I think the main attraction for this is that this doesn't really rely super strongly on the synergies, and there's so many synergies that it works with that it's still a very solid pick, right? It's 3 power, 3 toughness, 2 of that as first strike, split across 2 bodies for 3 mana. That's just a good rate. All right, that's like Call of the Conclave, a 3/3 for 2 mana is a good rate. This is a good rate as well, even though it costs 1 mana more. Splitting it across 2 bodies, getting the first strike is pretty good. And it has some synergy with Populate. It has some synergy with Go Wide. It has synergy with things like Intangible Virtue, Gaia's Anthem, stuff like that. It has some synergy with Blink, right? Even just blinking to get an extra chump blocker can win you some games, right? You and your opponent are swinging at each other. He thinks he has lethal. You blink your Attendant Knight, you get another blocker, right? You block with the Knight and the token that it generates, you survive, and then you kill him on the crackback. I imagine a lot of these things happening. So this card, again, is not super synergistic, but in a sense that's what I'm looking for, because these really almost parasitic cards like Wake the Reflections, I feel have the potential to be really weak. The Attendant Knight is always going to be good. Almost doesn't matter what strategy I'm in. And in terms of removal, again, a lot of the removal in this format is single target, and you've only got a few kind of AoE sweepers. And yeah, this guy is weak to them. Things like Cower and Fear will kill off the Attender of the Knight, and Pyroclasm will kill the Knight itself. Damnation, of course, will kill everything. So he is vulnerable to that, but I think it's just a solid enough card, a solid 3-drop, that you're going to want to pick this guy decently highly. And I think, again, it's kind of like with 2-drops, a little bit less in extent, but it's kind of like with 2-drops, you're not super excited about drafting this part of your mana curve if you have a bunch of signets. But interestingly, when you have a bunch of signets, it's possible that what you want to do on turn 4 is play another signet and then play a 3-drop, right? So unlike the 2-drops where you're kind of you're just hoping to skip over that part of the mana curve, in 3-drops, if you have an abundance of signets, you do have these options where you play a signet, you tap that signet that you just played, and you get to put out 3 mana worth of stuff, and that's pretty efficient as well. So it's not quite as bad as the 2-drops. You're not entirely looking over to just skip over these 3-drops. You're willing to have some of them, and the more signets you have, it's not like the value of this goes down. In a sense, the more signets you have, the more double signet openers you're going to have, and then the Attendant Knight can actually go up in value. So I like this guy a lot. Good standalone creature, has reasonable synergy with all the other archetypes. This is something that I'm definitely drafting pretty highly in the first pack when I know I'm open, and I'm still going to be drafting reasonably highly in the later packs, assuming I have some sort of synergy with this, right? Just a solid creature overall. Core Hookmaster. Core Hookmaster is pretty solid. The trick to it, I guess, is that it's more of an aggressive card, right? Because you're playing your creatures usually at sorcery speed. You're playing them on your turn, which means when it enters the battlefield, it taps target creature an opponent controls, and that creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So you get the turn that you play this to attack with that creature tapped, right? So you get 1 attack phase off of that, and then you get 1 attack phase and 1 block phase where that creature is tapped. That means that ultimately Core Hookmaster, when you're playing it just as a creature from your hand normally, you're getting 2 attack phases worth of the tapping, and you're getting 1 block phase, which kind of suggests you want to be attacking with this, right? Its body itself, unlike the Attendant Knight, is just not very impressive. It's a 2/2 for 3 mana. This was basically a 3/3 split across 2 bodies with first strike thrown in as added bonus. This is not as good. You're a little bit more limited in what you're looking for here. You want to be more aggressive, but at the same time, this is a very strong aggressive card. This is the sort of thing that's going to let you punch through that damage, and I particularly like this in Naya, right? Because that's really the most aggressive of the white strategies. I'd like it a little bit less in Bant, a little bit less in things like just straight up white green. And that's interesting because it hasn't entered the battlefield effect, so you'd think that I would want some blue to blink it. But it's just kind of interesting that I think when you add blue to your deck, you're kind of becoming less of an aggressive deck, and just inherently this Core Hookmaster is becoming a little bit less good. I don't want this really in like an Esper blink control type strategy, right? Because it's only stopping them from attacking me for 1 turn a lot of the time. So I don't know. This card has a little bit of conflict in the sense that it wants to fit into an archetype that has these blink and re-enter the battlefield effects, but it also wants to be in an aggressive deck, and a lot of these blink decks aren't particularly aggressive. Either way, I still view this card pretty highly, even if it has a little bit of schizophrenia in terms of what it's trying to do. I think you should be drafting this fairly highly. I think other people are going to rate this card fairly highly as well, so you're not going to get it very late. But I'm particularly interested in this card for a way of overrunning my opponents and using it in a more aggressive strategy. And if I have a few blink effects or something, if I'm able to just replay this with Core Skyfisher, because there are effects in white that are going to allow me to do this, right? If I have Flicker Wisps, for example, I think this card goes up a lot in value, right? If you're able to get both halves of it, you're able to get the reusing the enter the battlefield effect, and you're an aggressive deck, right? Then I think this is a lot of upside. So I really like this in Naya for the aggressive part of it. And I think you want to try and get some of the white blink like Flicker Wisp, or even maybe Core Skyfisher. Maybe not Momentary Blink, but you could be like splashing a fourth color if your fixing is good enough, just so you can reuse this later. And yeah, that's the way you're going to want to go with it. This is a card that makes a lot of the white blink better. Pitfall Trap. Pitfall Trap doesn't seem very exciting. 3 mana to destroy target attacking creature without flying is kind of meh, especially in a format where you have things like Terminate, where Path to Exile exists, where there's just a lot of really solid removal. That said, you're a little bit short on removal for white, right? And sometimes you're actually going to be able to pay the trap cost for this, and you're going to be able to use this for 1 mana, which is fantastic. I think the main thing to be said, though, is that you're in white, and you don't have access to a lot of removal, and Pitfall Trap is just what you're going to have to get, right? This is going to be what you just have to pick up to be able to make sure your deck can answer a lot of the other decks out there. And for that, I think it's pretty strong. I think it has a lot of flexibility across decks as well, though, and that's sort of a tricky thing, because if the Esper decks, for example, are also picking this up just to help complement their removal in the with black, then you might have some issues being able to get this in your white green or your white blue deck. I mean, I like this in particular in Esper because then I can Mystical Teachings for Pitfall Trap in exactly the scenarios where I'm going to be able to cast it for 1 mana, and then I have basically a 5 mana removal spell, right? That's pretty strong for me, being able to use that part of Mystical Teachings for it. I think you're going to have to draft this card highly, I guess is what I'm saying. It doesn't look that attractive, right? 3 mana for removal, but I think if you're in white, you're going to be a little bit hard up for removal unless you're able to kind of wrap your archetype all the way around to either red with a Naya strategy or Esper with getting the black in there. And but if you're not red or black, this is going to be one of these rare forms of removal that you're going to want to get a lot of. In a sense, in a lot of the rest of the format, the removal is pretty plentiful, right? Because black and red just have a lot of it. And it doesn't resemble a sort of typical limited format. But if you're only looking at say, white, right? The removal looks about like you would expect in a limited format, and I think you should be drafting it just as highly. A 3 mana destroy target attacking creature without flying that has some upside is going to be good enough a lot of the time. And so I think you should actually be picking this a lot higher than you might expect. Rootborn Defenses. Instant speed populate, which is nice. Creatures I control gain indestructible until end of turn, so potentially this blanks a removal spell. I don't know. 3 mana is kind of a lot to pay for this effect, though. And again, I think you want to have the good tokens, right, before you do much else. If this guy isn't populating anything, it's pretty bad. If this guy's only populating, say, a 1/1 soldier, that's pretty bad. If he's able to populate a 3/3, though, then I think you've gotten there. And as for the populate effects, I'm much more likely to take this than, say, Wake the Reflections, right? Because when this does go off, first off, I think it's a pretty good card, right? Because you're populating, you're creating the token, and then that creature is getting indestructible until end of turn. At instant speed, this is the ultimate in terms of they attack in, I populate, and then I blow them out, right? Especially against a lot of, say, go wide decks, which, I might have a lot of things like Lone Missionary that are going to trade with their Burning Tree Emissary, but then they don't trade, and I'm able to eat extra stuff. Being able to surprise a lot of these go wide decks by eating, 1 or 2 extra creatures of theirs on an attack is really what's going to blunt their offense, because a lot of them are sort of just making this calculation in their heads. Okay, if I attack now, he'll be able to kill off some of my creatures, but I'll be able to come back the next turn and finish him off. And so even though I will have lost a lot of card advantages by throwing away creatures, if I'm dealing damage to his face, then I'm going to get there. Rootborn Defenses is the oops, sorry, you're not, that calculation doesn't actually work. Your math is actually wrong, and I guess I win. And I really like that about Rootborn Defenses. So, again, I think cards like this are good enough. They can see play in your deck, but you kind of have to get there with the tokens first. I don't really want this if I'm not populating something decent. If I'm populating a 3/3, this card is excellent, right? It's instant speed, get a 3/3, and a nice combat trick to it as well. But make sure you have your Call of the Conclaves first, is what I want to say. Make sure you have your Splicers. Make sure you have the stuff that makes Populate good. And then, hopefully later on, you'll be getting these cards sort of for free, right? Other people won't have the tools to make use of this, and you'll get it pretty easily. So, great card for Populate, I think. Pretty strong, but you need to get there with the Populate. And again, that means getting the tokens first and drafting cards like this later. Gift of Orzhova. A lot of people are really excited about Gift of Orzhova. I am not. A lot of people remember playing this in like Gatecrash and it kind of saving their bacon in a lot of these aggressive games. A lot of people just really like the art. I think it has great art. I would pick it decently highly in Gatecrash as well. But in this format, again, I don't think lifelink is really super valuable. I don't think life gain is going to be actually all that great. And you do have this feature where a lot of your cards already fly, right? Core Skyfishers and whatnot. I do think one thing to note about this card is that it isn't really, you aren't forced into Esper doing this card. I know it has double black, double white. It's really just a very flexible card though, because you could play it for just double white and not have any black in your deck. You could just play it for double black, not have any white in your deck. It can fit across basically all of the decks potentially. But I just feel with so much instant speed removal, with a lot of flying already in the format, I'm not super excited about this card. There's bounce in the format as well, right? I don't want to have, my creature just get bounced when I put this on something. Like they could just flicker wisp it and this enchantment falls off. So I'm really not sold on Gift of Orzhova. This isn't really something that I'm looking to do in a lot of my decks. I think other people are going to draft it more highly. I'm going to let them do that, and I'm going to try and pick up other stuff. I just think for 1 and 2 colored mana, getting just +1/+1, flying and lifelink just isn't really that great. I don't think flying is as great a form of evasion as it would be in other formats. I don't think the lifelink is as relevant, but that's just my 2 cents. I could be wrong. Gift of Orzhova is a decently powerful card, but I would treat this like madcap skills, honestly, and I would say to myself, I'm probably not going to get a lot of value out of this. It's possible that I don't even get one hit in because they just have Terminate or something like that, and they just kill my creature. It's also just possible that this doesn't do anything for me, that I have my creatures already fly, the lifelink isn't relevant. So I don't know. I'm not really super sold on this card. Talon Trooper seems like a solid guy. 2/3 flyer for 3, I think is a good rate in this format. Again, there are a lot of like 2/2 flyers. Skynet Legionnaire are going to be one of them that I talk about. There are a lot of 2/2s in this format. The Core Hookmasters of the world, the Deputy of Acquittals, even stuff like I'd count Lone Missionary, Youthful Knight, and a 2/3, right? It's a good blocker and often can get through on offense as well. So this card is very unassuming, but I like it a lot. I'm going to draft these reasonably highly if I know I'm in Bant. I'm probably, because this card doesn't really have any synergy with Enter the Battlefield effects or with Populate or any of this stuff, the hope is that if you're one of these, if you're like, say, just straight up Esper control, this might just be a card that gets passed to you kind of for free, right? Because other people are more excited about drafting the stuff with the synergies. But if you don't have any of those synergies, maybe this is just a card you're able to get kind of late. I know it sounds weird when talking about a card that has 2 different colors of mana and the mana cost, but I don't know. I'm hoping this goes reasonably late. I'm going to pick it fairly highly, as long as I can pay that mana cost. And I just think a 2/3 flyer is a solid body in this format. I think it's going to get a lot of work done for you, and that's the reason I like this card. 2/3 flyer is good. I'm willing to pay 3 mana for it, definitely. Skynet Legionnaire, this is the opposite. I think a 2/2 flyer for 3 for the same mana cost is not going to be strong. I think it's going to be blocked by the Talon Troopers of the world, blocked by the core Skyfishers of the world. It's not going to be able to block the Youthful Knights. It doesn't want to block the Lone Missionaries, right? It doesn't block Attended Knights. I don't really want to trade with core Hookmasters, right? This card is not really that impressive for me. And unlike Talon Trooper, which is 2 allied colors in its multicolored cost, this is 2 enemy colors, which means I'm Naya. I have to be Naya with this card. I talked about this card in the red set review, but yeah, I really don't like this card. I don't think it really gets there, and just not a big fan of it. I mean, part of the bonus, and we'll see later with green, is that there are a decent number of cards that buff creatures, right? So just to take a little bit of a preview, if I go to green, if I put like strength and numbers on this guy, maybe that's a lot better, right? I could accept that. Might of Old Krosa, things of this sort. But again, just by itself, this body is not really impressive to me. I think a 2/2 flyer is not where you want to be. A 2/3 flyer is where you want to be. And so I don't really like this guy. Also, again, a lot of the removal in this format will kill this guy. Things like Magma Jet, right, will kill this guy. So I'm not super happy. And also, this kind of means that there's a lot of effects in this format, like the first half of Lingering Souls or Eyes in the Skies, just things like that. There can be a decent number of like 1/1 flyers, and it's more likely they have 2 1/1 flyers than they have just 3. So this guy trades down with them. I don't really like that either. Anyways, not big on this guy. I wouldn't pick him up very highly. Centaur Healer. Centaur Healer is all right. Has some synergy with Enter the Battlefield effects. Right, you can blink this guy, gain an extra 3 life. Not quite as great as just blinking a Lone Missionary, but the short of it is he's a 3/3 body for 3, and I feel like, especially if you're in kind of one of these more aggressive strats, you're just going to want a 3/3 body for 3, and you're not really going to care about this Into the Battlefield effect. That's going to be a nice kicker to it, but just having a 3/3 for 3 is going to be pretty solid. Right, in a Naya deck, you'll play your Mog Flunkies, and you'll play this guy, and the next turn you'll be attacking with 2 3/3s. Right, I think that'll be pretty strong, and yeah, I think this guy is solid. I don't think people are going to draft him super highly. And so if you're green-white, you're going to get you're going to get 2 or 3 of these in your deck probably. But I'd play them in my deck. I think they're fine. Not something I'm drafting very early, but not something I'm letting go very late either. So middle of the pack sort of guy. 3/3 body for 3 is just a good rate. Having Enter the Battlefield effects is pretty nice as well. I guess the question is whether or not I draft this guy over something like Attended Knight. Right? Attended Knight's another 3-drop, puts in 3 power, 3 toughness, and that's where kind of the synergies start to matter a little bit more. Right, where Attended Knight is going to fit better in these Intangible Virtue or Gaia's Anthem decks, and the Centaur Healer is going to fit a little bit more in just a deck that really didn't get there on the synergies, right? But either way, I'm probably looking to take Attended Knight first for a number of reasons. First is just the better mana cost. Another is just the more synergies that it has, right? That aren't hard synergies, but still are there. And yeah, I think you're going to get this guy in decent numbers, whereas Attended Knight you're going to have to fight for. This guy hopefully will be going later, and that's why I think in a lot of green-white decks, you're just going to be able to get 2 or 3 of these guys in your deck, and you're going to play them pretty happily. Eyes in the Skies. It's instant speed, which again is something I'm really looking for in populate effects. It's part of the reason why I don't really like Wake the Reflections. It is expensive, though. Even more expensive than Rootborn Defenses, which is kind of like, oh, this is a little bit too expensive. And definitely more expensive than Sunring Growth, which I like just because it was cheap enough in an instant speed. Right? The advantage of instant speed type stuff is that I'm going to be able to use it as a surprise. Right? I want to have that surprise blocker, that surprise whatever, and get the guy. And Eyes in the Skies, keeping up 4 mana for my surprise effect is not really something I'm looking to do. What happens if they don't play into my surprise effect, right? I'm not really going to get the value of the instant speed stuff. I'm not super sold on that. But this is, again, emphasizing the point that if you get there on the tokens, if you get there on the token generators, if you're populating a Splicer, if you're populating a Slime Ooze, if you're populating an Urbis Protector Angel, if you're populating something that's 3/3 or bigger, or like a Penumbra Spider, the second half of the Penumbra Spider, then this is great, right? Especially with the Penumbra Spider, I think, because getting a surprise 2/4 reach blocker is going to be pretty solid. But if you didn't get there, then this card isn't very good, and I think this emphasizes the cards that give you the tokens are very good, and they're going to be drafted very quickly, and the cards that populate aren't terribly good, and they're going to go later. And so if you want to make this archetype work, you need to pick up the token generators first and then get the populate stuff hopefully for free later, right? And I think the one thing that can be a little bit problematic is that not everyone out there is going to know that. And so you're going to have some times where you don't end up getting any of these late because some guy just has like 5 copies of Eyes in the Skies, but nothing besides Eyes in the Skies that's creating tokens for him. And he's just playing it as a 4-mana create 2/1/1 flyers. I'm not really excited about 4-mana create 2/1/1 flyers. Even at instant speed, I'm not super excited about it. Maybe the one exception is that because this is a self-sufficient card in a sense, it creates the 1/1 bird creature token and then it populates. So you're kind of getting it all in one package. It doesn't have the floor that a lot of these other cards have, right? Where if I'm playing, say, an Esper control deck, I want to be able to play stuff at instant speed, but Rootborn Defense isn't very attractive because I'm probably not going to have a lot of creatures to use with it. It's even more unlikely that I'm going to have tokens. It's possible in the Esper control deck that I take something like Eyes in the Skies without even anything else, just because I want some flyers, right? I want some creatures that I can develop on the board at instant speed, so I keep up 4 mana for my rewind or whatever, and then if nothing happens, I get to cast Eyes in the Skies at the end. The instant speed nature of it and sort of the self-contained package that it has might give it some appeal to just like a control deck, which doesn't really care that it doesn't care that the mana cost is 4 because it's going to leave up all of its mana at the end of its turn anyways, right? And just look for the best option during that turn. And Eyes in the Skies is just one more option that they otherwise wouldn't have access to. But I don't know. I'm not sure how highly I would pick it up in, say, a blue-black splashing white type deck. And I'm really looking more to just find the token cards with this. So unlike Rootborn Defenses and some of this other stuff, right, which is really all in on the populate, this is less all in, and it does have the instant speed thing, so it might appeal to other archetypes like blue-black. But overall, I still find the token generators, then find the cards like this is my piece of advice. Aether Toe. Aether Toe is interesting. It's instant speed. It's blue-white, or even just, white or blue. Kind of like Eyes in the Skies, I expect sometimes the Esper control decks to take this because it's instant speed, even if they can't make use of the Conspire. I think the real value, though, is in getting the Conspire stuff down, because I think there's going to be a reasonable number of times where you have untapped creatures and they attack with more than 2 creatures, right? Or blocking creatures, right? It's a little bit kind of worse on blocking in the sense because you have to tap creatures to use the Conspire effect, and I think you really do want to use the Conspire effect to make this useful, but backing up a little bit, again, it's kind of like Pitfall Trap. My removal in white is pretty limited, right? I don't have a whole lot in the common slot here that's getting rid of creatures of my opponents. It's really just Pitfall Trap at the common slot. Maybe we can count Core Hookmaster or Gideon's Lawkeeper kind of as pseudo removal, right? Just sort of temporary removal, tappers, tap them down. This is one of the few things I have that's going to be a little bit more permanent, right? At least from a card advantage point of view, it's card advantage, right? If I can take 2 of my opponent's creatures and put them on top of their library, I 2-for-1 them, right? The creatures will come back, and so if it's a threat that I just can't answer, then that's problematic. But in terms of just card advantage, I'm not going down a card by doing that. I'm going up a card if I do it. And so I really want to put this in decks where the Conspire is relevant. I think this is something, interestingly, you're going to care a lot more just if you're white, right? If you're like white-green, you might actually be more interested in this than the white-blue guys, right? Because you'll have less access to removal in those colors, and this will therefore move up in the ranks. Whereas, the blue guy might be splashing black or something like that and be able to have better removal, or just have more bounce effects like Mist Ravens and whatnot from blue, and have more ways to answer these creatures. So I'm actually going to draft Aether Toe reasonably highly. By that I mean I might pick this like 6th or 7th, right, as opposed to like 10th or 11th. I'm looking to pick this up like maybe even as high as like 4th or 5th, maybe. Maybe that's a little bit too high of an estimation, but this card is, if I am definitely in one of these colors that doesn't have a lot of removal, this card is going to move up a lot of spaces in my book. And the flexible mana cost doesn't hurt either because it leaves me very open, right? I can be white, I could be blue, I could just be one of the two, and that's pretty important. And again, instant speed means even if I am blue-black and like one of these instant speed control decks, even if I have access to better removal in blue-black, because this is instant speed, it's still going to have some value for me, even if I can't get off the Conspire. So, I don't know. I think this is a pretty flexible card. I'm going to draft it reasonably highly. I think more out of desperation than out of the quality of the card, though, just because I know I'm not sure how many pitfall traps I'm going to be able to get, and it might be possible that I just end up with a deck that has very, very little removal. Sensor Splicer. Sensor Splicer is kind of 4 power, 4 toughness for 5 mana, which is not really that great of a rate. The thing I want to note is that, again, there aren't a lot of token generators. If we look over all of this, we have Attended Knight creating a 1/1. We have Call of the Conclave, which is great. And then what else do we have? You know, Eyes in the Skies kind of technically creates a 1/1, but it's also one of these cards that wants these tokens. You don't have a lot of stuff at common slot besides the Call of the Conclave, which is going to be good for you, besides Sensor Splicer. So I think like Aether Toe, I'm not super excited about this card just on the face of it. 5 mana to get 4 power and toughness. I don't really care about golem creatures having vigilance either. This isn't that great of an effect. I think a lot of people are going to pass up this card, but I'm probably not. I'm going to draft it more highly than other people. It isn't an exciting card, but it's what makes all these other cards work, right? I'd rather get the uncommon splicers. I will say that. This splicer is the worst splicer in the format, but that said, I want the splicers. The golem splicing synergy is also potentially real if you get multiple splicers. So I think you start picking up this guy before you even find the other splicers, right? Because he's going to at least make the populate stuff good. And it's not as if 4 power and toughness for 5 mana is horrible, right? It's unimpressive, but it's not that bad. And this turns on Blink, this turns on Populate, this turns on a lot of other synergies. I think this card is going to be something that surprisingly you should be picking up a lot more highly than you would think, given that it's a 5 mana card. And yeah, I think definitely this is something that you're interested in, and draft it more highly than you would think. In the uncommon slot, lots of really strong stuff. I really think that these colors are really supercharged in terms of the uncommon slot and kind of weaker at the common slot. There's so much good stuff here. Path to Exile is first pickable removal in my opinion. Yeah, in Limited, this downside is more relevant than it is in, say, Modern. Giving them a land can be a pretty big deal. That said, it's a single color. It's splashable, right? Unlike a lot of the other top-tier removal like Terminate or Putrefy, right? And the downside is still not that horrible for you, right? They get a basic land card. They put it in the battlefield tapped. Yeah, I'm helping them fix. Yeah, I'm helping them do whatever, but if I get rid of their big threat with this, right? If I get rid of their 4/4 flyer, if I get rid of just what's preventing me from attacking in the air or the ground, this is a game-winning card, right? This is top-tier removal, very first pickable, very strong card. I think not a lot of people need to be told that, but I really do think, in contrast to the 2-color removal, which kind of does the same thing but a little bit better, I'm going to pick this a lot more highly in Pack 1. This is a first pickable card in my opinion, and yeah, really big on this card. Pick this highly. Intangible Virtue. It's interesting because this is one of the big payoff cards for having creature tokens. But again, there aren't a lot of tokens. It's a little bit less of an issue, though, than Populate was, because the struggle with Populate is you needed to find not just tokens, but tokens that were better than 1/1s, right? And that was something that was kind of difficult to do. You had the Splicers, you had Call of the Conclave, but not a whole lot else. Intangible Virtue is actually fine with 1/1 tokens, right? I'm fine with having Lingering Souls. I'm fine with Attended Knights. I'm fine with Eyes in the Skies. When we go into green, for example, we're going to see things like Fists of Ironwood, right? I'm fine with these as my tokens. Even Penumbra Spider is going to get the bonus, along with like Slime Molding and whatnot. And it's potential that I go into Naya tokens, and then I have even more stuff, again, with like Dragon Fodder, right? So Intangible Virtue is a very strong card. It's something where you really want to find those tokens, but the requirement of finding the tokens is not as stringent as it was with the Populate cards, right? So this card is not Wake the Reflections. I don't think anybody needed to be told that, but I think what I was talking about with Populate cards only half applies to Intangible Virtue. I'm willing to pick this relatively highly. I do need to find the synergies to make use of this. I'm not going to want a deck that can only create like a few tokens and put this in. That's not super exciting to me. But I think in Naya tokens especially, this is going to be really strong. And I think this is going to be fine and if you're able to get there with Splicers. I think this is just going to be fine if you have any sort of token generators. Your Attended Knights, for example, I think this is going to be fine. If you just have a green-white deck with enough Attended Knights and Call of the Conclaves and things of this sort, yeah, I'm going to be fine putting this in my deck, I think. And so it's It can fail. You could pick this up and just not find the other pieces, but I'm much more willing to spec on this than I would something like Rootborn Defenses, right? Mist Meadow Witch. Mist Meadow Witch is a 2-mana 1/1, and for 4 you can exile target creature and then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. I'm not super excited about this. This is a little bit like a worse Azure Mage in a sense. I mean, I guess the question is, how often is paying 4 mana? And this is kind of like paying 4 mana with white and blue kind of, it belies this sort of this hybrid casting cost thing, because I am going to be both white and blue to make use of this. I mean, this is obviously a card that's meant to go in the Blink deck, but I'm exiling the creature and returning it to that card to the battlefield under its owner control at the beginning of the next end step. So it's not like I can just keep on paying 4 mana and keep on blinking some creature like a Dinrova Horror again and again and win that way, right? For one, 4 mana just means I'm going to have a hard time paying that twice, but also I just couldn't pay it twice because the creature is only going to come back into the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. That's going to be a little bit tricky. It is nice that this can target my opponent's creatures, right? I'm a little bit wary of that because there is just the potential that their creatures that I want to get rid of are something like a Dinrova Horror, and I don't want to be blinking their Dinrova Horror for them. But it's kind of neat that I could use this kind of in the same way that I use like a Core Hookmaster. Like at the beginning of their instep, I can exile one of their creatures, and then it won't come back into play until my next instep, right? So you can do things at end of turn to clear their blockers, much in the same way you can kind of, but at instant speed, you could tap down their stuff with Core Hookmaster, and you can get in more hits that way. So it does have some interesting uses. That said, again, it's a 2-mana 1/1. The effect is kind of expensive. There's just there are problems with this card, I think, and you're really going to have to want a lot of blink synergies before you pick up this card, and I'm not going to pick it up very highly there. Because again, it's just a 2-mana 1/1. It's going to die to so much. It's going to be weak in the early game. A lot of these decks where I want to ramp up to 4 mana and be able to use the ability productively and stuff like that are also decks where I'm going to have a lot of signets. And so this is going to be competing in my sort of signet slot for what I want to play on turn 2. I think there's just a lot of issues with this card, and I'm not really willing to pick it up very highly. Even if I am in the blue-white blink strategy, I'm not super sold on this card because I can see a lot of scenarios where I go to blink a creature and they kill it, or I don't have anything to do with this, or just I'm dying because on turn 2 I'm playing this as opposed to like a signet, or it's an awkward card for me. I don't have 6 mana. I can't just play it and use the ability. I don't know. I think once you get this creature rolling, of course it's pretty strong because this blanks a lot of removal. It can exile itself, right? So it can protect itself, but this is not like an Aetherling or something, right? This is still pretty weak, I think. And because it returns at the beginning of the next instep, it's not like it's unkillable either. It costs you 4 mana to blink this as opposed to say 1, and it's possible they say, all right, before the end of your turn, I'm gonna attack. We're gonna target your Mist Meadow Witch to kill it. You say, okay, I'll blink in response. They say that's fine. It comes back in at the end step. They untap. They hit it again. It dies because you didn't have 8 mana left open to. So it's not unkillable. Yeah, I don't think a lot of people need to be told why this card is bad. A lot of them will just see it's a 2-mana 1/1 and go, okay, yeah, I'm not going to draft this. But I just wanted to agree and elaborate. I don't think this card is very good. I think it's kind of like a Johnny card in this format. I'm super not sold on this card, and I don't think you should pick it very highly. Sunhome Guildmage. I talked about this earlier. I'm not really impressed with this card. It's a Naya tokens card, and it does have a good effect for Naya tokens. It's still kind of expensive. I don't know. I think that you want to find some synergies with the tokens, right? You want to find the Gaia's Anthem. You want to find the Intangible Virtue, and then this card really becomes good. But I worry that you're going to be in a lot of scenarios where you're creating these 1/1 soldier creature tokens, and unless you have the other stuff to go with that, it's not going to be that good. There's a decent amount of stuff that goes with it, even just stuff like strength in numbers I'm going to be fine with, right? So it doesn't necessarily need to be Gaia's Anthem. It doesn't necessarily need to be Intangible Virtue. But, I am locking myself into 1 of 10 archetypes by picking this card, right? It's red-white, which means I have to be Naya. It's not like there's a Boros deck in this format, really. And that's a big cost, right? So I do think he's a strong creature. I do think there's definitely a place for him. There's synergies that are very relevant. They're going to make these abilities worth their mana cost. But he's putting me into very specifically one archetype. I don't like that, and I'm not going to pick this guy very highly as a result. I'm gonna wait till I'm the Naya deck and I'm the Naya deck of the table, and then this guy's going to come to me for free because no one else is going to splash red white. Right? They're not gonna splash for this effect. They're gonna want this in their Naya tokens deck. I'm the only Naya tokens deck at the table because I cut them all out of being Naya tokens, and then I get this guy for free. That's my view of this. This is a payoff for going Naya tokens. It's not a card you pick to enable Naya tokens. I think it should be the other way around. Pick the Naya tokens cards, get this guy for free, not pick this guy and then hope to force Naya tokens, because if you don't get the Naya tokens thing going on, this guy doesn't make your deck. Right? Whereas the other stuff would, even if you didn't find this guy there, right? Thundersong Trumpeter, kind of same story, but even worse because I don't really like this guy's effect all that much. Again, I think it's worse than Gideon's Lawkeeper in a lot of regards. So 2 mana for a 2/1, better body than a 1 mana for a 1/1. Kind of the same story with Soul Warren and Lone Missionary as I talked about before. But again, this guy is basically a tricolor card. Gideon's Lawkeeper is a monocolor card. This guy only goes in one deck, and even then, he isn't really that impressive. Not as impressive, certainly, as Sunhome Guildmage, I feel. So I'm not going to draft this guy very highly. I don't think he's very good. Lingering Souls. This card is amazing. Even if you're not really getting the flashback, and I think you can splash black no matter, if you're white, you can find a way to splash black. You might be Naya, but you'll pick up some, something that'll, like a Signet or whatever. You'll pick up a tap land, something that gives you black, and then you'll have a reasonable shot at being able to flash this back later. Even just creating 2 1/1 white flying creature tokens for 3 mana is a decent deal in Limited. It's not a bad rate. And this card, if you can flash it back, is going to be really strong. I think that the Esper control decks in particular, because this is basically an Esper card, are going to pick it up. But I would pick this up even if I'm not an Esper, and just look to, again, like, have a couple Signets, a couple tap lands in my deck that get the black, and just grab that extra black. If I'm like 4-color good stuff, especially, I'm going to pick this card really highly. Like if I'm getting a lot of fixing, yeah, I'm going to take this card. This card's just so strong. It's so difficult to efficiently remove these creatures. There isn't a whole lot, and yeah, just a solid card. You'll win a lot of games just by swinging in the air with these guys and putting up damage. And even at worst case scenario, these guys are chump blockers, right? You can prevent a lot of damage to yourself by using these guys. So I'm really high on this card. I think everyone else is going to be as well. I don't think you necessarily need to be Esper because there's just enough value on the front side, and you can wait to flash back a while, right? So your fixing doesn't have to be like on the spot. Whereas like Call the Conclave, you need green-white on turn 2, right? That's your big requirement. Lingering Souls, as long as you have 3 mana, 1 of it white on turn 3, you're getting enough value to kind of justify the card. And then if you just are able on turn 7, turn 8, turn 9, turn 10 to have 1 black mana, then you're getting there. It's not as strict a requirement as these other kind of dual-colored cards because you're paying on an installment plan, and the other half is something that you can pay much later and still get decent value, right? 2 1/1 flyers for 2 mana is still going to be a decent deal later in the game, right? They're still going to be hard to remove. They're still going to be problematic. I like this card a lot. Pick it up highly. Flicker Wisp, this card is also fantastic. It is kind of odd to talk about Flicker Wisp just after talking about Lingering Souls, because one of the banes of this card is, of course, just going to be 1/1 flying tokens, right? The Eyes in the Skies, the Lingering Souls, the whatever, because he's a 3/1 flyer. But this guy has so much usefulness. For one, it's enter the battlefield effects for your own creatures, right? It's exile another target permanent. You can exile anything, really. Your opponent's stuff, your stuff. You can't exile your own Flicker Wisp and try and get some sort of like you can't treat this like a Norin the Wary for your Norin Soul Sisters deck. You can't build that in this format, right? Because it's another target permanent, and also it only returns at the beginning of the next end step. But this kills tokens, right? You can blink a token. You played an Urbis Protector, you got a 4/4 Angel, now your Angel's gone. Or if you have the Urbis Protector, you blink the Urbis Protector as opposed to the Angel token, you get another Angel token. So this card forms the basis, or is sort of at the core of a lot of synergies, right? Whether it's populate and enter the battlefield with tokens, whether it's just blink effects. It also counters a lot of stuff. It counters the token decks. It's aggressive as well. It's a 3/1 flyer, which is a beating, and it can clear enemy blockers, right? You play this, it gets that guy out of the way, right? Just for 1 turn, so it's kind of a little bit worse than Core Hookmaster, where they stay away for another turn. But it's a 3/1 flyer for 3, whereas this is a 2/2 ground creature for 3. I'm willing to accept that this doesn't get a thing out of the way for 2 turns to have that extra point of power, to have that evasion ability. This card is just fantastic. 2 white in the mana cost is a little bit rough. Makes it a little bit less likely that I first pick this, but not by a lot. I think this card is just really solid. This is the card that makes me want to, like, I open this in my pack and I say, yeah, we grab this, and now we're just going to force some sort of strategy involving it. And there's a lot of them that go into this, so it's not like you're stuck in one archetype with this. It's not just a blink card. Sometimes just, you could play this in Naya tokens. You could always just be blinking your opponent's stuff. I think it would still be fine. So I like this card a lot. Really big on it. Wall of Denial. This is really an Esper control type deck. Although, I don't know. A defender, when you have a lot of flying creatures, is also pretty nice, right? Just something to hold the ground. I think more or less this is just your unkillable blocking creature. This is almost like a detention sphere for creatures when you're playing the Esper control list, because you're not going to really care about attacking in and letting their creatures block it. Like, being able to block a creature's, and their biggest creature as well, is oftentimes just going to be the same as just exiling one of their creatures to you, because your win condition is going to be flashback mystical teachings for an opportunity, right? So, strong control card, blocks everything in this format, basically. I think this is pretty good, and there are some weaknesses, I suppose, of this. Again, it's not doing as much work against the go wide decks, because it's just blocking some 2/2. That's really not as valuable to you, right? 0 power walls have some issues like that, but Defender Flying Shroud, this just means I get to blank one of my opponent's creatures pretty much no matter what. The only thing that's going to hit this really is Damnation, or maybe some sort of like sack effect, like a Liliana of the Veil, but not very common effects are going to hit this. Solid card. If I know I'm Esper Control, I'm going to pick it up. I probably don't pick this up very highly otherwise. I really just want to be in that one archetype when I pick up this card, because, as part of a blue-white blink sort of mid-range value deck, this probably doesn't do as much work. And, yeah, I don't know. But for that Esper Control list, I'm actually going to pick this pretty highly. Sort of same story with Sin Collector. Talked about this in the black review. It's an enemy-colored card, so you're really looking at the shard, right? The Esper shard. It's not really... You're not going to have an Orzhov deck. But yeah, I think this guy is decent. Just even being able to look at your opponent's hand, even if they don't have an instant or sorcery in it, I think it's going to be reasonably good. And again, if you have blink synergies, you can blink on their upkeep potentially and clear something from their hand. So I'm reasonably high on this guy. I know a 2/1 body for 3 mana isn't that impressive, but this is a card I expect to see pretty late, and I'll pick it up pretty late and play it if I'm in the Esper control list, and I won't use it otherwise, but I do like it for those lists. So again, not something you're ever going to first pick. It's Esper, and it's not a super exciting a card in Esper. It's not like the one that's really going to draw me into it. This is going to be one of the cards I get for free, and I know this effect doesn't seem that strong, but I like it a lot, especially when I'm trying to play instant speed. I like to be able to look at my opponent's hand, even if I'm not pulling anything. Just the ability to look at my opponent's hand and know what I need to keep up, know what I need to be able to answer, and what I don't have to answer is going to be so huge. Every time I play one of these instant speed decks in Constructed, I want to have these sort of effects. I want them in Limited as well, especially since I have no idea what my opponent could have, right? Because it's a limited environment. I think that value even goes up further. Willie Thokdar, talked about this guy in the red review. 5/4 for 3. Yeah, solid creature. Really good. I don't mind playing this guy. Like, if I play turn 2 Signet into this guy, that's fine too, right? I might leave a mana up, but I'm perfectly fine with that, right? This guy is worth a 4/4. This guy is worth a 4-drop, right? I would pay 4 mana for him probably. But yeah, so I like this guy a lot. Again, you might not be able to always play him on turn 3 because of the fixing requirements, but there are a lot of tri-lands in this set, so if you have like 2 tap lands and then whatever's filling in the 3rd slot, you can get there. Again, it puts you into Naya, but this is going to be one of your payoffs for Naya. I think all these 3-color cards from that cycle are going to be pretty strong. This guy's no exception. Just a solid beater in a deck that wants to have a solid beater, right? The Naya deck's looking for that strategy. Unflinching Courage. I've talked a lot about enchantments and how I don't really like them. I didn't really like Gift of Orzhova. I don't like Madcap skills. I don't like a lot of these buffs. This one is a little bit better because I think +2/+2 and Trample. I think the Trample is going to be about as relevant a form of evasion as the flying. And +2/+2 is bigger game. So, I don't know. It has all the same weaknesses. That there's a lot of instant speed removal in this format. I put this on a creature, I attack with it, it gets Pitfall trapped, it gets whatever, I don't even get to hit with it, it gets Aether Toad, it gets bounced, the Flicker Wisp blinks it. There's so much stuff that can happen to whatever I put this creature on. But of the enchantments, of the auras, This is probably the one I rate the most highly. I'm not going to pick it up very highly still, but um, despite its mana cost being green-white as opposed to hybrid white-black, which is much more flexible, I'm probably going to pick this with about the same frequency as I pick Gift of Orzhova, right? I'm going to pick it up about as high because I think that this the +2/+2 is going to just be more relevant. Still, I'm not going to pick this up very highly nonetheless, just like I'm not going to pick up Gift of Orzhova very highly because I worry with all the instant speed removal in this format, this is just going to get destroyed. And even if I get in a hit with this guy with Trample and Lifelink, that's nice. But then I'm pretty sure my guy's getting bounced or getting blinked or getting, something happening to him. And there's just not a lot of value here. I mean, this might as well be a combat trick is one way to think about it, right? Like, I don't think this is going to last more than one turn. If it does, it's solid, but I'm not going to pick this very highly. Wayfaring Temple. This is one of the few populate cards that I'm going to draft pretty early, I think. Having power and toughness equal to the number of creatures I control, I think at minimum in a lot of these go-wide decks and a lot of these green-white decks means that this guy is probably going to be like a 3/3. I think he's going to be reasonably good. Right? I can pretty early on get this guy to be a 3/3. And I just imagine these turns where I go like turn 3 Wayfaring Temple into turn 4 something that creates a token. Right? I can even just say Eyes in the Skies. Right? I attack with this guy. I leave up 4 mana. And if they block, I say, oh, whoops, Eyes in the Skies, and I get my bird tokens. And if they don't block, maybe I Eyes in the Skies, my guy hits for 3, and then I get an extra bird token, right? That's not bad. This guy can just run away on its own, right? Like this, if you're able to play this guy early and start connecting with him, right, or make it so that your opponent has to just chump block him, you can eke out so much advantage with this card. So this is actually a card I'm going to draft very highly. I think this is really strong. They downshifted it from rare to uncommon. And I think this card is going to be one of these things you really want to see in your populate deck. And I'm willing to draft this before I have... This is going to be one of the populate cards that I draft before I have the token stuff going on. Because I think just by himself, he's going to be so solid. I think a lot of turns that you attack with him, he's going to be a 3/3 or better. And then just get better and better and better until he's basically unstoppable, and your opponents are going to need some sort of removal for him. And that's kind of what I want to see with my 3-drops. I want to see a 3-drop where my opponent has to spend removal on it or they lose the game. That's kind of really what I'm looking for here. So big on this guy. Draft him very highly. I know he's dual color, but I'm actually willing to... like this is sort of one of these archetype defining cards, I think. Going to be really solid. I'm going to pick him reasonably highly. Yeah, definitely. Rock's Warmonk, again, like Willie Thoktar. Just one of these strong cards. 3/4 lifelink is good. This blocks a lot of these aggressive strategies. 3/4 is also just a really good body. There's not a lot that beats this. There's a lot of things like Centaur Healers, a lot of things like the Golem tokens. There's a lot of stuff that just can't block this guy, can't attack into this guy. This guy's just going to be solid. So really solid card. Draft him if you're able to pay the mana cost. This is going to be definitely one of the big things you get whenever you're one of these 4-color good stuff decks. Right, all these Alara cards, you're gonna grab those cycles and you're gonna be able to play them. Good reason to be 4-color good stuff. Great payoff if you're banned and no one else is able to pick this up. Good reason to splash, right? Like all these are also decent splash ideas. It is a little bit tricky because you do want to play these on turn 3. Ideally, they start losing their value. But if you have the good fixing, right, then this card is great. And this is one of these things that really inspires you to get the fixing and splash into another color because these tricolor cards are great. Master Splicer. This guy is absolutely amazing. This is a very first pickable card, I think. I wonder whether or not I would first pick this card over Path to Exile, which is saying a lot because this is just premier removal. Because this guy forms the basis of so many of the decks, right? Blue-White Blink wants this guy. The Populate deck wants this guy. And even by himself, even if you don't get there with anything else, he's a 4-mana with 5 power, 5 toughness, right? He's creating basically a 4/4 golem creature. He's also got the synergy if you find other splicers. I mean, this is the guy that really brings together so many different archetypes, even more than the Wayfaring Temple, I think. So I pick Wayfaring Temple highly. This is the one that I think is actually in contention. I'm going to first pick this over Path to Exile even, which is just top-tier removal. So can't say enough that's great about this guy. He enables so many synergies for white, whether it's Blink, whether it's Populate, whether it's even just go wide, right? I could just have this guy as a token. I'm fine with that. If I'm getting 5 power, 5 toughness for 4 mana, right? That's great. I'll Gaia's Anthem, the 2 bodies thing will be relevant to me. I like this card a lot. I'm going to pick this up very highly. I think everyone else will be as well, so grab them while you can. Vanish into Memory. I talked about this in the blue set. Part of the problem is that there aren't a lot of your own creatures that the extra text on this is good for you for, right? You want to be blinking things that have higher power than toughness, right? That's ideally what you're doing. And if you're blinking something that has the same power as toughness, then you're getting the loot, which isn't bad, but you're not really getting great value. You want to be blinking your opponent's stuff a lot of the time because your creatures just don't have that imbalance between power and toughness, right? If I look over all the cards here, how many of them have higher power than toughness? Not Lawmaker, not Warden, not Skyfisher. Lone Missionary does. All right. Youthful Knight does. 2/1, not really that great, but whatever. Right? And only the Lone Missionary has an Enter the Battlefield effect. This guy's a 2/2. I definitely don't want to blink my own token. Don't really care about blinking this. Don't want to. All right, like all these creatures have either the same power as toughness or higher power than toughness. I'm just getting kind of a loot effect. I don't know if I'm really willing to spend a card just to reuse like a Core Hookmaster Enter the Battlefield effect and then loot 2. Right? I don't know about that. And it's problematic. This is kind of a good defensive card, but you really need to get there on the Enter the Battlefield effects, I feel, before you can use this. And even then, like, there just aren't a lot of things you're looking to blink. I mean, Flicker Wisp would be great because then Flicker Wisp can blink whatever it is that I blink, but like I'm not going to get an card draw off of this with most of the creatures that I have. I think one of the things that really redeems this card is that it is pretty useful against opposing aggressive decks, which will often have things like Spike Jesters or these other creatures, right? And I think that it's also a great way of removing, say, again, Urbis Protector. I can remove the Urbis Protector Angel with this, right? If I blink a token of my opponent's, I'm destroying the token. And if it's 4 mana instant speed, destroy a 3/3, destroy a 4/4, and then I get to loot 3, loot 4, that's reasonable. That I would accept. But I don't know. I feel like this is kind of a sideboard card. I'm not really willing to pick this up very highly, and I feel like a lot of the decks that are going to be able to support these mana colors aren't decks that have something that I particularly want to blink, or at least I'm not going to get the benefit. Like it's going to be looting at best, and sometimes I'm actually going to go down cards playing this to blink something like that, right? So I don't know. I will see myself main decking this in some cards that really get there with the blink thing, but I almost view this more as like a sideboard card that I'm picking up and to use against my opponent's creatures more of the time, right? I'm going to bring this in against the tokens decks. I'm going to bring this in against aggressive decks because I can blank one of their attacks, right? And have more of a chance of drawing cards and getting card advantage off of this. I'm just not excited about this card otherwise, and I'm not going to pick it up very highly, especially since it's multiple colors, right? And it requires me to be pretty specifically into a strategy, I think. Yeah, not super excited. Tower Gargoyle. One thing I haven't talked about a little bit is that ramping to 4 mana, again in this format with Signets, is going to be very powerful. And the only like 3 cost cards that I'm really super satisfied playing in lieu of anything else are like these Rock War Monks, Woolly Thoctars, this sort of thing. This Tower Gargoyle is one of these 3 color cards, right? It's part of the same cycle, effectively. But it's 4 mana as well, so I'm getting that efficiency. I'm not having this scenario where like I have these 3 color cards, but that cost 3 mana, where I kind of want to like play Signet on turn 2 and then have the joy of being able to play another Signet and then cast a 3-drop, right? I think the 4-drops are really important in this format. Tower Gargoyle is just one of the better ones. Again, Master Splicer also counts. This guy's fantastic. If you're an Esper, then this is definitely one of the things you want to do. I talk about this in Blue-Black, about how Blue-Black especially wants Signets, and ramping to this guy is going to be a really big game. Nothing's changed here. If you're like white-blue, I start thinking about splashing black just for how strong this guy is. 4/4 Flyer is just really good in this format. Bronzebeak Moa. This is kind of what the Naya tokens deck strategy, but also has some synergies with just green, straight up green-white, and a little bit with Blink. Because whenever another creature enters the battlefield under my control, gets +3/+3 until end of turn. That's pretty big game, right? If I'm playing something like Eyes in the Skies, right? Like this card is so hard to block because there's so much stuff you could do at instant speed. I could play Eyes in the Sky. I could play this guy on turn 4. Next turn, I keep up Eyes in the Skies, right? And suddenly I'm giving the ability to turn this guy into an 8/8. That's huge. I think this card is really strong. Again, I like ramping into 4-drops in this format. I think this is one of the best 4-drops. Um, just a really good card, and it's got flexibility as well, because I could play this in Naya, I could play this in Bant. There are a lot of cards, right? These splicers and whatnot. I could play this turn 4 into a sensor splicer the next turn, right? And in that case, this guy is less of a surprise. He's not a surprise 8/8, but he's still an 8/8 that's beating in, right, after I play my sensor splicer. That's pretty big game. I think there's a lot of stuff that generates tokens. It's going to be very easy to be attacking with this guy as an 8/8. I think he fits a little bit better in the aggressive strategies like Naya, right, where you want to be beating in with this guy. But yeah, regardless of what you put him in, just there's going to be a lot of times where this guy is just a superb attacker. He's a 4-mana 5/5 at least, usually. I think this guy is really strong. I'm going to draft him very highly. And I think he's at his tippy top in Naya, right? This is going to be like a pack 2, pick 1 if I know him in Naya. This card is just really good beating. Can't be said of the same of Agent of Masks. It's a 5-mana 2/3. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 1 life. At the beginning of your upkeep, so you don't even get it the turn it comes into play, and then you gain life equal to the life lost this way. Yeah, I'm not interested in 5-mana 2/3s. This isn't very good. Yeah, 2/3 body's decent, I suppose, but it's on the ground. A lot of the 2/2s are flyers that I'm looking to block. I mean, they're more like centaur healers and stuff on the ground. Just, again, this is a really bad rate for this creature, and this effect is not very strong. It doesn't even work the turn you put it into play. Yeah, I'm going to pass on this. Banishing Stroke. This is white removal. You notice we didn't find a lot of it. Path to Exile here, Aether Toe, Pitfall Trap. Yeah, this is good white removal, I would say. Like, there are going to be some games where I'm fine just paying 6 for this. And if I'm like the green-white deck, right, I probably don't have a lot of scry effects, but I also have a lot of card draw effects. So whenever I do draw this, I am going to be able to play it for its miracle cost. And with a miracle of just 1, right, this is just really top-tier removal. The downside, of course, is you start with this in your opening hand, or you don't have the white mana up when you draw this, or whatever, right, because it's too early in the game, or they just don't have a creature for you to get. But it's artifact, creature, or enchantment, right? It's pretty much anything. You put it on the bottom of its owner's library, not the top, right? So it's not like you're going to, if there's some threat that you can't handle, right, it's not like it's going to come back the very next turn. And it doesn't require that threat to be like attacking or defending like you see with like Pitfall Trap or Aether Toe, right? It's unconditional. And 6 mana is a lot, but I'm almost willing to cast this for 6 mana. And if I'm willing to cast this for 6 mana, because I'm kind of that hard up for removal, and this is just unconditional removal, whereas a lot of the others have conditions that might be bad, then being able to miracle this for 1 is just fantastic. So I'm actually going to draft this pretty highly. If I know I'm white, I definitely have to pick this stuff up, especially if I know I'm white, but I don't think that I'm going to be black or red, right? I really want to pick this card up and be able to make use of that removal, because I just don't have access to a lot of other stuff in this color. Great card. Picked up decently highly. Urbis Protector. Urbis Protector was in Gatecrash a really bad card. Like a really bad card. This card was a trap. And it doesn't look that impressive here. You're paying 6 mana to create a 1/1 and a 4/4 flyer. I mean, I don't know. 4/4 flyers are pretty strong in this format, I feel. But still, 6 mana is a lot. The big upside, of course, is that if you can blink the Urbis Protector or you can populate, then this card becomes fantastic, because a 4/4 white angel creature token is just about as good as you're going to get for that sort of thing. And normally I wouldn't be very high on this card. I would remember back to the days of Gatecrash where this card was just way too slow. And but I think this format is going to be a little bit on the slower side. And 2, I think there's just so much synergy here with white-blue and with white-green that this card is going to keep you relatively open. Right? I don't even really mind playing this in just my control deck, right? I'm looking, a lot of times if I'm playing, say, Esper Control, I might be looking just for extra threats. And a 6 mana angel with a little 1/1 body to go with it is going to be decently good, even if I don't have blink effects, even if I don't have populate effects. I might just be playing this guy as, I wasn't able to find a Dinrova horror at the end, and I'm Esper Control. I'll just grab this guy. This guy's fine. I think this is all right. So I'm going to value this guy pretty highly because of the synergies that are here. I'm willing to overlook a little bit the kind of the bad rate that I'm getting. It's not even that bad of a rate, though, because a 4/4 flyer is a pretty solid body. In a lot of formats, I'm willing to pay like 5 mana for that, no problem. Um, I'm not super happy just paying this cost and not having any other synergies, but I think the format's going to be slow enough, and I think there are all these synergies there that, again, it's like talking about the populate stuff. You want to find the token generators before you find the populate cards, right? This card turns on so many synergies, whether it's blink or populate, that I think you're going to pick this guy pretty highly and be happy with him, right? He's going to be your top end for a lot of these decks. Going to green now. Some overlap. One of the things I note about green is that there is a little bit of a ramp sub-theme, but again, they're kind of lacking at the higher drop slots. In blue and black, we saw a lot of stuff at 4-drop. Here we see basically Penumbra Spider. That's the only common 4-drop in green, and this is a fantastic card. Probably one of the best green commons here. But again, you're kind of lacking in these things to ramp to with signets, which is a little bit surprising. So the color overall might be a little bit weaker, but there are other forms of ramp in green which are pretty interesting, right? We have Avacyn's Pilgrim, we have Explore. Even I would count things like Sylvan Ranger as kind of ramping, right? Because they're helping you hit your land drops. And the question is, what are you going to do when you hit all those land drops? If you're able to pick up enough of these ramp cards, and I think these ramp cards are decently strong on their own. Avacyn's Pilgrim is a 1-mana mana dork that's always really strong. I like Explore a lot. I think it's just a solid card. Maybe I just have a higher valuation of it than other people, but I like this card a lot. Right? At very least, it cycles itself, which I'm pretty happy with. And Sylvan Ranger, which I think is just going to help you in a format where you want to have good fixing a lot of the time. Right? This is especially when you're playing, when you want to get out those like 3-color cards, when you want to get out the Rox War Monks, when you want to get out the Sprouting Thrynaxes, the Woolly Thoctars, right? You're going to play a Sylvan Ranger on turn 2, fetch the missing mana that you have, right, to play one of these cards, and then you're going to get to play them. So this is a pretty good enabler for a lot of that stuff, and I think that's really important. So there's good ramp and mana fixing here, and the question is, what are you going to ramp to? Right? And in the common slot, you don't have a whole lot. I mean, you have this kind of Jundi card with Golgari Rotworm. All right, he's a 5-mana 5/4 with, a useful ability in Jund. Okay. I have Slime Molding. I mean, I do want tokens. Again, I've emphasized you want to find the tokens before you find the populate, I think. And this is a token generator, and I'm actually going to value this more highly than I normally would, kind of like with Herb's Protector. But what else is here, right? Like Penumbra Spider? I mean, there's not a whole lot here. The really big payoff is at the rare and the common slot. Things like Arachnus Spinner, a 5/7 reach for 6 mana is just so good. And it actually is able to have an extra effect where it fetches you an Arachnus Web, which kind of synergizes with the fact that there isn't a lot of great removal in these colors, and Arachnus Web kind of does the removal job. So I don't know. There's an interesting ramp sub-theme here, including at the uncommon slot with things like Urban Evolution. I guess the trick is finding things to ramp to. There are rare cards like Craterhoof Behemoth that you're going to be interested in, but probably the most common things you're going to be ramping to are Slime Moldings and Arachnus Spinners. I do like both of those cards if you can ramp to them. So, I don't know. It's interesting that there's not a lot of 4-drops here, but I still care a lot about signets with this because I have a reasonably good shot at ramping into even higher stuff past the 4-drop slot, right? The signets will accelerate me out into my Arachnus Spinners, and a 5/7 reach is just... It's so huge. I mean, this is just such a huge creature. There's a lot of single target removal in this format, so there's some difficulty here. But even then, like, they cast a Terminate at this, and you feel bad that you spent 6 mana on a card and they spent 2 mana on a card and you traded evenly, but you can tap the Arachnus Spinner, pull an Arachnus Web from your deck, and at least you're not really down cards. They have to figure out a way to get rid of this Arachnus Web on whatever creature you put it on. I like that. Arachnus Web is also interesting in that it has the ability to stop like a Vithian Stinger, which can be pretty problematic. The downside, of course, of Arachnus Web is that it's vulnerable to Blink, and it's vulnerable to Sacrifice, which are both big themes in this format. But, yeah, I don't know. I think you're kind of hard up for removal, and Arachnus Spinner being one of the things that you can ramp to, it makes this card a little bit better, right? I don't know. Anyways, one thing I want to note, there is a little bit of a green ramp sub-theme here. Avacyn's Pilgrim, Explore, Sylvan Ranger, Urban Evolution, right? I'd even count Harmonize as one of these payoffs for ramping. Coiling Oracle also is one of these ramp cards, right? Because if it hits a land, it puts it into play. Just be aware of that. The other thing, I guess, to be aware generally of green is that the 2-drops, there are things in the 2-drop slot, but not a lot of them are actual 2-drops, right? Druid's Deliverance, not really actually a 2-drop. Seal of Primordium, more of a sideboard card, right? Sundering Growth, not something I'm dropping on turn 2 unless I'm able to kill a Signet. Fist of Ironwood, I need a creature to enchant. Revive, what am I going to revive in the early game? Strength in Numbers, I'm not looking to buff anything, right? So there's actually very, very few actual 2-drops. I still feel like in green, you're still very much a color that wants to find signets, right? Because you're actually surprisingly weak in this 2-drop slot. You've actually only got a few good things like Sylvan Ranger. Deathwood Cobra's okay. It's mostly just a Grizzly Bear with some upside later. Burning Tree Emissary is solid, but you're going to have to be competing with red for that. Call of the Conclave and Coiling Oracle are fine, but then you have to be in a specific color combination. I don't know. I think that the 2-drop slot is, despite all of these 2-drops, is a little bit deceptively weak, because the things that are just straight green that you're going to be able to get pretty reliably are rough, and I don't know, you either have to be green-white and get your Call of the Conclaves, which you're going to be drafting very highly, or be like Bant and you get some Coiling Oracles. That's kind of a difficult thing to do. I still think you want to focus very heavily on Signets, even though this is kind of a little bit more of an aggressive color with red. Still, you want the Signets. There's a ramp sub-theme. There are some things to ramp into, and if you find them, then all these ramp cards are going to get better and better. And just be aware of that. So first off, Avacyn's Pilgrim. I feel like I don't even need to be in white to have this guy, because even if he tapped for colorless, he's a 1-mana dork. That's really solid. Like, this is, again, I'm a little bit wary of drafting 1-drops, because a lot of my lands are going to come into play tapped. This is a 1-drop where I actually don't care about that feature, right? Because the thing is, if I play an untapped land and play Avacyn's Pilgrim, next turn I can play a tapped land and still have enough mana to play a Signet, right? So unlike the other 1-drops where I because of the existence of these tap lands and Signets, I was always kind of going to be in the scenario where I might open the game. I might have a tap land and an untapped land in my hand, right? And then I can't really play my turn 1 creature, because that means I won't be able to play my Signet next turn and everything will be thrown off. This is a guy that doesn't throw that off, and just 1-mana dorks are so strong. I'm going to draft this guy very highly. I think 1-mana dorks are great. I'm not even going to care if I end up in white, right? Because just being able to tap for colorless is going to be fine with me. 1-mana dorks, really strong. This guy's no exception. Draft him very highly, I feel. This is probably, along with Gideon's Lawmaker, one of the best 1-drops in the format. I guess there isn't a whole lot of competition. I guess you're looking at what Scorched Rusalka and maybe like Wingcrafter as the other best 1-drops, but I like this guy a lot. Interestingly, he doesn't really gain, unlike a lot of the other 1-drops, he doesn't gain a ton of value when you have, say, Ranger of Eos. But still, I feel like because there's so few good 1-drops, if you have a Ranger of Eos, having this guy in your deck, at very least, you're going to be able to fetch him, and you'll be able to fetch 2 things with the Ranger of Eos pretty reliably. And because he's just such a solid creature on his own, I feel like it's almost more of a scenario where he buffs Ranger of Eos than Ranger of Eos buffing him, right? In any case, I like this guy a lot. Draft him very highly. 1-mana dorks are really good and limited. Deathhood Cobra. It can have reach and death touch if you pay 4 mana, so it can kind of do the job of a Deadly Recluse in a sense. I'm still not super sold on this guy. He's still a Grizzly Bear. He's a 2/2 for 2, which isn't horrible. And these are upsides that are relevant, right? This allows you to trade up with like a 3/3 or something like that. It allows you to play a better defensive game. They try and attack him with their 4/4, and you're willing to pay 2 mana to trade this guy up. But I'm not super excited about him. I really want to have, again, more Signets. But I do note that there aren't a lot of great green 2-drops, and I feel like one of the problems that I might have if I'm in green is I find myself not finding the Signets, and I find myself not finding a lot of the 2-drops, and I'm going to end up drafting this guy just to fill out my curve. I think he's fine for filling out your curve, but not, of course, you don't want to fill out curve, you don't want to draft curve fillers really highly in any format. This guy's just a solid curve filler. I'll take him for that. Druid's Deliverance, it's a fog with Populate. It's instant speed, which I care about. It's also, because it's like Sundering Growth, right? It only costs 2 mana. I kind of like this effect at instant. I know the effect doesn't seem that strong, the fog, and maybe it isn't, but I'm kind of willing, if Druid's Deliverance works out to something like 2 mana, instant speed, gain 3-4 life, and Populate, maybe that's good enough. Um, yeah, I would play this in my deck. Like everything else with Populate, though, I want to say I'm not going to draft this very highly. I'm going to look for the token makers first, and then these cards hopefully are just going to come to me late for free. I'm not going to have to put early picks on them. That's what I'm hoping happens with Druid's Deliverance. This is actually a reasonable one because, again, 2 mana, instant speed. You had me at 2 mana, instant speed a lot of the time, right? I think the effect is reasonably good. It is a little bit more, in a sense, more flexible than Sundering Growth in that I don't need to target an artifact or enchantment. It is a little bit worse than Sundering Growth in that if I do have an artifact or enchantment to target with Sundering Growth, like from one of my opponents, then this is just a better effect than preventing combat damage to me, not to my creatures or anything, just to me. I don't know. I'm not sure if I draft this actually over Rootborn Defenses, because Rootborn Defenses is even better in a sense. Rootborn Defenses is like preventing all combat damage to your creatures, and I'm probably willing to spend 1 more mana, but I'm not drafting either of them highly. I want the token generators first. That's sort of the general theme of a lot of these Populate cards. Find the token generators first. Explore. I like this card a lot. I think this card is actually, in some cases, constructed reasonable. This is kind of like the green Time Walk. Not really. Time Walk is a lot more powerful of a card, but sometimes you play Time Walks as Explorers, and you just do it because it's okay. I think if you're willing to do that, you're willing to play Explore on its own, just as an Explorer. The fact that it cycles is always relevant. I like that this in effect allows me to ramp sometimes the same way a Signet would, right? If I play Explore and I get to play 2 lands, I think that's really strong. And in fact, it ramps me in a way that's a little bit stronger than Signet sometimes, because if I play Explore turn 2, I play another land, I have 1 more mana up because the land doesn't necessarily come to play tapped. There could be advantages to that. It also, interesting that being able to play an additional land on this turn means I can play this on turn 2. And if I had an opening hand that had, say, 2 tap lands in it, I still got to play my 2-drop and play my tap land and be fine for like turn 3, turn 4, right? Because I was able to kind of cheat. I played a tap land on turn 1, then I played my untapped land on turn 2, played Explore, played my tap land, right? This would be even stronger in a format with like Karoo lands, but I still think this is very strong. And again, there's like a green ramp sub-theme going on here, kind of like there is sort of this black reanimate or red-black reanimate type thing going on in elsewhere in the set. Just a small sub-theme, doesn't have a lot to support it, but is decently strong kind of on its own. I like this card. I'm going to pick this pretty highly, I think. I mean, I guess highly relative to what you'd expect, so I'm still talking like, 6th, 7th pick, but or like 8th pick, but I'm still pretty happy with this card. Fists of Ironwood. I've talked down about a lot of the enchantments in this because there's a lot of instant speed removal. This isn't really an enchantment, though. This is more like a sorcery speed. If you have a creature, you can get 2 1/1 green tokens and have a little extra benefit. Trample is also, I think, a fairly relevant form of evasion in this format. I like Trample, so I don't think the effect is nothing. Obviously, you do want to play this. Like this is a little bit less flexible than, say, Dragon Fodder, because it's possible your opponent kills the target for Fists of Ironwood before this comes into play, because there's a lot of instant speed removal. That's a bit of a danger, though you can kind of wait till they're tapped out to do that. I think this card overcomes those disadvantages, though. I think Trample is enough of a risk to take, right? It's worth taking the risk to get the Trample, because Trample can be really big on a lot of things. For example, I talked earlier about Bronzebeak Moa. If I play a Bronzebeak Moa and then I put Fists of Ironwood on it, it becomes an 8/8 Trampler that turn. That's pretty nuts, right? So I think there are going to be a lot of times where your opponents tap out and you're going to have an easy, high-value Fist of Ironwood, and having the tokens is going to be a pretty big game. A lot of the go-wide strategies, you're really going to want this guy. This is going to synergize with your Gaia's Anthem. This is going to synergize with your Intangible Virtue. Just a solid token generator. Yeah, really good. I like this a lot. I'm going to draft it reasonably highly if I know I'm kind of in that token strategy. Obviously less good in like a Blink strategy or something like that, but like if I'm pack 1 pick 1ing something like a Bronzebeak Moa, this could very well be my pack 2 pick if the pack is weak, or my pack 1 pick 2 pick if the pack is weak. Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers. But yeah, I like this card. Again, some of the disadvantages of the other enchantments, but I don't mind if my guy gets bounced the turn after. As long as I'm being able to get the create 2/1/1 Saproling creature tokens, I'm fine with this, and I'm happy with this, and it has synergy with a lot of other stuff that's going on, right? Naya, Jund, anything that is looking at, say, red maybe, or is interested in red is going to be interested in this card as well. Revive. This card's bad. Sorcery speed, return target green card from your graveyard to your hand. Yeah, I don't know. Even if this was instant speed, I'm not sure I'd really be that happy. It's kind of interesting because I can revive back if I really get there with the like ramp strategy. I can revive back my Arachna Spinner or my Craterhoof Behemoth. My opponent had an answer for it the first time. I find it the second time. I close the game out. But yeah, I don't know. Sorcery speed, return target green card from my graveyard to my hand. I don't know. That's just not. It's not what I'm looking for. It doesn't do anything on its own. I have to wait till something that I want to get back dies, and even then I'm spending 2 mana. It's almost as if Explore just said draw a card. 2 mana, draw a card, right? I would not care about the card otherwise. I want a strong enough effect on here. I don't think being able to kind of tutor through your graveyard is that good. Yeah, I don't like this card. I'm not going to pick it pretty much at all. I don't think I'm ever going to play it. Seal Primordium. This is a sideboard card. It works well against signets. I like that. It works against a lot of these enchantments. Again, I think there's enough enchantments and artifacts that I'm looking to like main deck something like I would consider main decking a Sundering Growth. I'm not going to main deck this though because unlike Sundering Growth, this doesn't have its own effect, right? If I have a Sundering Growth in my hand and my opponent never plays an enchantment or artifact, yeah, this does nothing and that sucks. But you know, I could. It's still the effect that I'm getting of Populate outweighs that, right? I'm having enough upside on here. Here, there's no upside, right? I'm just destroying a target artifact or enchantment. That's not good enough. There's no enchantment theme to the set. I don't really care. There's no like devotion theme, so I don't care about having this mana cost on the I don't really care about having a green mana symbol on the battlefield. Yeah, this is a sideboard card, not one I'm going to particularly side in a lot either. I don't even really know if I care too much about countering signets with this. Because unlike, say, Spell Pierce, which also has other flexibility and only costs 1 mana to counter this signet, this cost me 2 mana. I don't know. I will bring this in if I see signets in large enough quantities. I'll bring this in if I see things like Gruul War Chant or Gaia's Anthem or Intangible Virtue, right? And then I think this will be a really strong card. But otherwise, I'm just not interested in this. Strength in numbers. I'm interested in this. Especially in the Naya Go Wide strategy, anything where I'm putting a lot of creatures, because this is effectively a finisher. This is going to be, again, I think trample is a pretty relevant evasion keyword in this format, and plus X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. If I'm in Naya, I'm attacking with a ton of creatures. This is a finisher, right? This is Craterhoof Behemoth in a bottle, right, for 2 mana, and I like that a lot. I think, again, if you get a card like your Bronzebeak Moas, right? And you are able to attack in with some 8/8 Bronzebeak Moa, and then even better, you take that Bronzebeak Moa and you pump it up to, I don't know, a 13/13 Trampler or some ridiculous thing like that. I think this is really strong. Again, this is more for the aggressive strategies because it's until end of turn, target creature gains trample and gets +X/+X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. You're not going to be guaranteed in a lot of games that your opponents are going to be the ones attacking with a ton of creatures, and even then, trample becomes irrelevant then, and you're really just using this to kind of combat trick eat one of their things. I'm not super big on that, but in these a lot of these aggressive strategies, Naya tokens, green red go wide, things of this sort, I think this card is going to be very good. This is going to be a finisher for you. This is going to be one of those ways that you get around the board stalls that would otherwise ruin your game plan. I like this card a lot. I'm going to draft it pretty highly once I know I'm in one of those archetypes. And I might even consider this just as one of the things that helps make those archetypes. And so I'm going to kind of spec on it a little bit. Whereas, I might not spec on some other cards. Sylvan Ranger, I think this card is really good. I think mana fixing is important in this format. I think this is going to be sort of the core of a lot of 4-color good stuff strategies. I think this is going to be the card that enables you to play your Rox War Monks and your Sprouting Finaxes, Woolly Thoctars. I talked about this a little bit, but I just think this is a really good card. The mana fixing is good. The ramp is going to be potentially relevant with this ramp sub-theme. I like everything about this card. Even has some blink synergy. I'm probably not super interested in blinking this, but if I have to, I will. Like if I'm playing a Bant blink deck and I have a Ghostly Flicker and there's a second creature to target, why not be Sylvan Ranger? Sure, why not? I'll grab another basic land, put it into my hand, ramp me up a little bit. I also just like this as like something to bounce. If I'm playing green-white, this is my core Skyfisher bounce target, right? I play this, I get a land next turn, bounce this, get my 2/3 sort of on the installment plan, right? I'm paying my 2/3. I'm getting my 2/3 flyer for like, right, 4 mana in that case, but I'm getting a 2/3 flyer that also puts a basic land card from my my library into my hand. That's a decent rate. I'm gonna accept that. I'm willing to. Again, I like Talon Trooper, which is a 3 mana 2/3 straight up. Part of the reason I like Core Skyfisher, just cards like this get more value to them. Also, kind of, I guess I'll talk a little bit. Helps me with Fists of Ironwood too, right? Like all these bounce effects. If I can bounce a permanent, right, that's not bad. I like that. You can also interestingly flicker this with Flicker Wisp, right? Fists of Ironwood. Anyways, I didn't talk that much about that, but Sylvan Ranger, good blink synergy, good ramp synergy, good fixing. I like this card a lot. I'm gonna draft it decently highly. Again, this is one of these like 5th, 6th, 7th pick type things. You'd ideally get like premium removal, bomb, stuff like that before you get this, but just this is great fixing, and I'm gonna like having a flexible mana base. That way, later I can pick up Woolly Thoktar, Sprouting Thrynaxes, this sort of stuff, and not worry too much because I'm gonna have a turn 2 play that almost guarantees that I'm gonna be able to play these cards on turn 3, which is when I want to play them. I like this card a lot. Burning Tree Emissary. I describe this as one of the best commons in red. It's also one of the best commons in green. You don't necessarily need to be both green and red, though it helps because, you know, it makes the mana a little bit more flexible. But solid card, 2-drop, you know, even has, like, if you're just green, white, blue, has some synergy with blink effects, right? This is the card that in effect makes your ghostly flickers cost 1 mana, you might think, right? Like that's one way to look at it. You can flicker this and something else and you've only spent 1 mana technically. You can have some nice turns like that, but yeah, I'm just happy for this because it's a solid 2/2, right? It gets me mana when it comes into play, so potentially it's free. I could play Burning Tree Emissary and a Signet, even if I'm doing both strategies, it could work. I like this guy a lot. I think he's just going to be a free 2/2 a lot of the time, and really solid card, really strong, and yeah, pick him pretty highly. Ground Assault, I talked about this in the red thing. There's a lot of good red removal. This is also pretty good removal. It's probably a little bit less relevant in green-red, right? Because you're a more aggressive strategy, you might not have as many lands, but still, it's removal. It's solid, and if I'm splashing red for whatever reason in my green deck, then I'm willing to take this, even if I'm not base red, because I don't necessarily need to be playing this on turn 2. It's not like the Call of the Conclave type stuff where I need to have these 2 colors, otherwise the card starts losing a lot of value when I'm playing it on like turn 4, right? Playing a 3/3 on turn 4 isn't that impressive, but if I'm waiting till turn 4 to play Ground Assault, that's perfectly fine because then I'm going to have more lands. I'm going to kill something bigger, right? That's kind of the point. So this is one of these multicolored cards where it looks like it has a very restrictive mana cost, but I'm actually perfectly fine with this because I'm not expecting to play this card on turn 2, right? So I like this card a lot. Good removal. Value it as removal. Pick it highly. Center and Growth, talked about this. Call of the Conclave, kind of already talked about this. Just really excellent card. Draft this very highly. Getting the tokens is very important. Coiling Oracle. This is for the Blink strategy. So this is kind of like, it's sort of a cross between, say, like Sylvan Ranger and Elvish Visionary. I mean, one way to look at it is just a better version of Elvish Visionary. This doesn't really help you as much with the fixing like Sylvan Ranger does, but it potentially ramps you in a way that Sylvan Ranger doesn't. Because if the top card of your library is a land, then you're basically just putting that land into play, and that's pretty solid. And at worst, you're just drawing a card. So I think this is a really great Blink target. If I'm like Bant Blink, then this is what I'm bouncing with my Core Skyfishers. This is what I'm potentially blinking with just even like momentary blinks. I'm chump blocking with this guy, then blinking him out. This is my second target whenever I'm playing a Ghostly Flicker, right? Lots of great stuff with this card. It is, again, you're in enemy colors here, so you're Bant for sure. And that does indicate in a sense that this ramp strategy, this ramp sub-theme is kind of Bant, because this is potentially one of these ramp cards, and Avacyn's Pilgrim is doing white, right? So you might want to value big blue drops as well. I don't know if they're really, I mean, there's some stuff you could do with blue in this format, but in any case, I think this card is pretty solid. It's very restrictive on the mana cost, but if you are Bant, and if you have some reasonable chance of playing this guy turn 2, or if you have enough blink and bounce effects, you have enough Core Skyfishers and whatnot, right? If there's enough synergy with this effect, this guy becomes really solid. Not something you're going to first pick, something you're going to definitely want to have when you get into that specific archetype. Arachnus Web, I don't like this card by itself, and I really want to say that you should get a Arachnus Spinner to fetch an Arachnus Web before you draft an Arachnus Web, because there's so much that can go wrong with this. It's 3 mana, and it's kind of like a better version of Pacifism in a sense, in that it prevents activated abilities as well, but it costs 3 mana, which is 1 more than Pacifism, and this is also a format where there's a lot of blink, there's a lot of bounce, there's pump spells as well, so they could just, they could strengthen numbers potentially to get rid of this if they really wanted to, right? There are Anthem effects, so you put this on a 3/3, but then it becomes a 4/4, and then this falls away at the end of turn, right? It is at the beginning of Instep, if enchanted creature's power is 4 or greater, destroy Arachnus Web, so you can stop them for a turn, right? This is a way to just blank one of their attacks for a turn, just get through for a turn, right? But yeah, I'm not super big on this. I think that this is a card you're going to pick after you get the Arachnus Spinner, not before. You're not going to be excited to get this. It's removal, but it's really bad removal. It's vulnerable to a lot of stuff that's happening in the format, right? You're going to put Arachnus Web on something, and then they're just going to next turn blink it or bounce it or do whatever, and you're just not going to get value to this. And I don't like this card very much. Even though I'm hard up for removal, I'm not going to pick this card very highly. Hungry Spriggan. This is a goblin, by the way, so if you're paying attention to the Goblin Assault, you have to attack with this. I guess you don't really care because this is a 1/1 on defense, but a 4/4 Trampler on offense. I like a 4/4 Trampler for 3 mana. This is a very good aggressive card. This is definitely one of your green-red Gruul, like, beat them down type cards. I like this a lot. I'm going to pick this pretty highly if I know I'm Gruul. I'm probably not going to pick it very highly otherwise. Because this just isn't going to work terribly well in like any strategy where I'm not just attacking with this guy every turn. Right? I definitely want to be an aggressive card, or aggressive archetype before I draft this card. That said, it's a 4/4 Trampler for 3 on offense. I mean, yeah, it'll die to some removal that it otherwise shouldn't if it was just a straight up 4/4 Trampler, but I'm willing to do that. Yeah, sure, let's go for it. Slaughterhorn. A 3/2 for 3 mana is not very impressive, especially when there's a lot of stuff with 2 power for 2 mana. But the Blood Rush part is pretty big. This gives you so much flexibility. This is, again, like Hungry Spriggan, just another really good offensive card, right? You want to be able to attack with creatures and use this Blood Rush a lot. And it's flexible. I like that. So I like this card a decent amount if I'm in green-red, like Hungry Spriggan. I do feel like I need to be in green-red to make this work, though, because otherwise it's just not... It's not super exciting, but I could be Jund potentially. I might even pick this up as Naya. I don't need to be straight green-red, right? But I do want to be one of these aggressive decks in some shape or form. Giant Baiting. I think this is pretty strong. It has synergy with a lot of things. It has synergy with the sacrifice strategies because you get to exile these guys. It's strong just like a Naya Tokens thing. It's just a good sort of finisher in a sense. You just create 2 guys. Again, with things like Bronzebeak Moa, this effect is pretty nice. I use this, I conspire, and then suddenly I'm attacking with like an 8/8 Bronzebeak Moa and 2 4/4 Giants. Some really good effects here with this card. I think it does seem like card disadvantage. I'm just attacking with 2 4/4 Hasters, and they go away at the end of turn, and I do need to have some setup to get that, but I think if you're in any of these go-wide strategies or sacrifice strategies, this card is going to be pretty good. It's obviously not like something you want in Bant, right? I do think you want to be green-red of some flavor, right? But if you are, I actually like this card a lot. I like it a lot more than a lot of other stuff that's going on. So I'm going to pick this actually reasonably highly. I think it's reasonably flexible. There's a lot of stuff I want to do with it. Centaur Healer, talked about Centaur Healer. Penumbra Spider, probably one of the best commons here. Maybe the best common here. I don't know. Avacyn's Pilgrim, ramp for or 1 mana dork is pretty good. Ground Assault, Solid Removal. Burning Tree Emissary is very good. Penumbra Spider, I particularly like this because, again, I really think there's going to be an emphasis in this format of playing Signets and ramping to your turn 4. And this card just shuts down so much of what your opponents want to do, right? There are a lot of 2/2 flyers. This blocks them all. There are 3/3s and 2/2s. This will eat the 2/2s and block the 3/3s. They can't just remove it. You're going to get a token. You want the tokens because you want to populate, right? You don't have blink synergies, so unlike some of the token makers, you don't have that going on, but just this card is so solid, it'll stabilize you so well. It's such a good blocker. It's very, very hard for your opponents to do anything about this. There aren't a lot of cards that punch through this. It eats a lot of stuff on offense. It's hard to remove. It's got token synergies. this is a card that I'm looking to first pick sometimes. Honestly, I just think it's that good of a card. The pack might need to be a little bit weak for me to be first picking it, but wouldn't have to be that weak. This card is very solid. Golgari Rotworm. Enemy colors means this is a Jund card, right? Anytime you see enemy colors, again, it's an Alara shard. This is one that fits in really well, though. Sacrifice a creature, target player loses 1 life. Jund is the sacrifice archetype. And, a 5-mana 5/4 with upside, yeah, that's decent. I like this. A lot of your games as this sort of Jund strategy are going to want to see sacrifice outlets like this. This is like Scorched Rusalka, but instead of being on a 1/1 for 1 creature, this is on a 5/4 for 5. I like that deal a lot better. I think the 1/1 for 1 is going to be a lot worse than the 5/4 for 5. I'm going to try and pass whenever I can on Scorched Rusalka as my win condition. I'm going to try and grab Golgari Rotworm a lot more. But again, it's very specific. You're only playing these sort of Jund sacrifice strategies. But the sacrifice stuff is kind of nice. Like if I'm green-red, I might just splash black just for this, just so I have some way of getting reach for my deck. Because if I get blocked on the ground by a bunch of Penumbra Spiders and stuff, then I want to have this as sort of a finisher late game. Something on my top end to get them. Finally, in the common slot, we have Slime Molding. A lot of people don't find this card very exciting. It's sorcery speed, creates a token, but I really do think you want to get tokens a lot. And there is this green ramp sub-theme, so even if I'm just able to get, like, if I pay 5 mana and get a 4/4, I'm happy with that. If I pay 4 mana and get a 3/3, I'm also kind of happy with that. Not really, because I could just play Call of the Conclave and gotten my 3/3. But I'm going to have some times where I play this for like 7 mana, I get a 6/6, right? And then I'm going to start populating that 6/6. That's going to be pretty brutal. My opponents, this is going to be a good top-end finisher. And I think if you get there with the ramp, or you need to enable the populate, this is going to be one of the things you pick up. I'm actually going to pick this up relatively highly. I mean, I think that it's not like I'm going to pick this along with Penumbra Spider or something like that, but I would consider this alongside my Explorers. I would consider this alongside my Fists of Ironwood. I think it's it's one of these cards that is really going to help pay me off. I'm going to draft things that call the Conclave before it, right? Because I do think you want to be in the populate strategy to make the best use of this. But I don't necessarily need to be in the populate strategy. I could just be in a ramp strategy, and I don't know. Again, tokens are a little bit vulnerable. They can get bounced and blinked, and that's going to be bad for you. But I think you want token makers. If you want to make the populate strategy work, you want to draft those first. This is one of the token makers I'm willing to draft. In the uncommon slot, Might of Old Krosa. This is all right. I would have preferred something like Groundswell, right? Giving a creature +4/+4, but they get to know what it is first off. I don't know. This card is good. I mean, it's played and constructed. It's decent. I'm not super excited about it, though. Right? Usually in the context of constructed, it's played in Infect, which has just a special synergy with this stuff going on. This is not like Vines of the Vastwood or something. It doesn't have these other flexibilities. It's kind of less flexible. I'm not going to draft this very highly. I'm just not looking for combat tricks. Again, there's also a lot of instant speed removal as well. But, if I see this going late, I'm going to pick it up, and I'll probably play it. It's not a bad combat trick overall. There are going to be some turns where I want to pound in with one of my guys, right? Or like maybe in particular, I play like I'm in green-red and I play a Mog War Marshal, and I need another creature to attack with it to be able to to be able to attack with it. I can pump that creature +4/+4 and swing in. And I think ultimately what you want to be satisfied with if you play this card is you want to be satisfied with the possibility that this is just 1 mana, deal 4 damage to your opponent. That this acts like a lava spike, right? If you're willing to accept that, if that's the scenario you're fine with, if you're one of these aggressive decks, then I think this will fit in fine. Otherwise, I'm just not that excited about this. I'm not going to draft it highly because of that. Tattlemunge Witch, I talked about this. Decent green-red go-wide card, but in red in particular, you already have access to a lot of better 2-drops. The Burning Tree Emissaries of the world. And, I don't know, the trample is relevant, right? You do need to be green and red, though. This is kind of like that Mist Meadow, what was it? Mist Meadow Witch. This is kind of like the green-red version of this Mist Meadow Witch. You can't just be white or blue and say, oh, it's hybrid, I can get away with this. This is you need to be green-red because this other ability is going to have to be relevant. You don't just want a random piker in whatever your deck is. It's just not the power level that we're talking about. But if you are green-red, this effect is decent. And it's just a question of, like, I don't really want more than one of these. I don't know how highly I'm going to pick these. I kind of need to get there with the go-wide strategy first. It's locking me into an archetype usually pretty specifically. Like, I want to be green-red or Naya. I'm not sure I really want to be the sacrifice strategy. Anyways, decent effect. I'm not sure how highly I'm going to pick it up because it does lock me into an archetype, and I'm just not. It's a 2/1 for 2 in colors that have better 2-drops. Thornscape Battle Mage. I like this guy. I mean, he's flexible. You're kind of locking yourself into Naya because I think you want to have access to both of the kickers, but both of the kickers are relevant, right? The white kicker will destroy a signet, and the red kicker will deal 2 damage to a creature. If I spend 5 mana to get a 2/2 that deals 2 damage to a creature and blows up an artifact, I think I'm getting my money's worth. The guy's flexible. But still, I want to be Naya. I want to have access to all this stuff. If I'm not Naya, then again, this guy could just be a Grey Ogre, right? Or he's a 4-mana 2/2 that deals 2 damage when it comes into play. That's a decent deal. At very minimum, I need to be green-red, though. So I don't want to pick this up early because I don't want to lock myself into colors, right? And you do need to have one of these kickers. You can't be like, I don't think you can be Bant and really play this guy, right? But it is nice that these 2 kickers are both allied colors. So if you pick this guy up and you play him in a green deck, one of the kickers is going to be available to you almost always, right? You could be Jund, and then the damage kicker will be there. You could be Bant, and you'll have the white kicker be there. And both of them are relevant, so I don't know. But I do think you want the red kicker most of all, because if this guy is just a 4-mana enter the battlefield, destroy an artifact, that's not really enough, right? Like, this is just a bad Reclamation Sage, right? I'm not interested in that. And yeah, I think I have to be green-red at least, and I'm hoping to be white as well before I pick this guy. And yeah, that's just not super exciting as a first pick. I don't want to lock myself into those colors. Gaia's Anthem. Creatures you control get +1/+1. Yeah, I think this is great. I'm actually going to value this higher than I value Intangible Virtue because it's just more flexible. This is all creatures. And this will work in a green-red go-wide strategy. And like a lot of times, again, it's sometimes hard to generate the tokens. There's Fist of Ironwood. There's Dragon Fodder. There's things of that sort, right, which will just create the tokens. But a lot of the token generators are actually stapled to creatures as well. It's splicers, right? It's Penumbra, the first half of Penumbra Spider. It's a lot of things like that, and so there's a decent chance that you're able to get enough value even in a tokens deck, even in a very tokens focused deck, that you're going to have enough value from Gaia's Anthem that you're really going to like it over Intangible Virtue even. So I like this card. I'm going to draft it fairly highly. I do need to be in that archetype, of course, to make this work. But there are a lot of archetypes for which it works, right? I don't mind this in Jund or Bant. And I think in anything that's Naya colored, I'm really going to like this. So I'm going to draft this pretty highly. Golgari Germination. I think this card is a bomb. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token. This is like one of the things that's really going to fuel that Jund deck, right? Again, enemy colors, it's Jund. But this is like the core of that sacrifice strategy. And maybe this is one of these cards that makes a sacrifice strategy really good, because I feel like not a lot of other colors are going to splash for this necessarily. Like maybe green-red, go wide becomes Jund because of this. But I'm not sure if you're like Naya that you really want to splash into black for this, because you still are you're one of these more aggressive strategies, right? And you don't want to be having to get more fixing to go 4-color. Like a 4-color aggressive strategy just seems weak. So you're kind of safe from splashing on that side. And you're also safe from splashing on the other side, because if I'm blue-black, I probably don't have a lot of creatures. I'm not going to get a lot of value out of this, right? I'm just not, like, this card isn't really that useful to me. So this is like a very solidly Jund card, and it's going to go to the Jund drafter at the table. And I think this card is just so good when you're in that Jund strategy, right? Because this lets you double dip on all those sacrifice effects. This lets you play your Golgari Rotworms and just sacrifice creatures again and again and again. And obviously, whenever a non-token creature dies, so it's not like you're just sacrificing the same token again and again. But I'm saying you're getting double dipping all this stuff, and it doesn't take a lot of double dipping when they're losing 1 life each time, and more if you have one of these Falconwrath Nobles or something for you to close out a game. So I think this is one of these going to be these key linchpin cards in that Jund strategy. It won't fit anywhere else, and because of that, you might not want to pick it up early, but it's such a good card for that strategy. You might just want to pick it up early and then force Jund, right? Certainly, I think if you see this card going late, you know Jund is open, because if a Jund player is at the table, they're going to grab this card. Putrefy, kind of the same story in a sense. It's not a linchpin of the Jund strategy, but it's such a good removal spell. It's three mana, instant speed. This is one of your rewards for being Jund, right? This card is really going to be strong. It's just unconditional removal. Again, I'm not really willing to pick it very highly as opposed to like Path to Exile, because it does lock me very specifically into a single shard. There's only one archetype in which I can really play this. I mean, I guess I could use this in like my 4-color good stuff decks, but I'm not sure I'm really interested in tying myself down that early with cards like this. But it's so good. It's instant speed, destroy target artifact or creature. It could be an artifact as well if there's really something messing you up. But I think destroying a creature is going to be the more relevant thing. Instant speed, unconditional removal. Yeah, please. Sprouting Thrynax, again, one of these Jund payoff cards. It's 3 in a row. Your Jund colors, this is just one of the good 3-color creatures from that cycle, right? Solid. Talked about this in red as well. Woolly Thoktar, talked about this a number of times now. Unflinching Courage and Wayfaring Temple, talked about these. Rock's Warmonk, talked about this. Vital Splicer. So here's the green Splicer. I like this card a decent amount. It's 4 power, 4 toughness for 2. Or, 4 power, 4 toughness across 2 creatures for 4 mana. That's solid by itself, I think. Special synergies with Gaia's Anthem and like Intangible Virtue and things like this. It does well in just the go-wide strats. And then in the Splicers deck, right, you get that Splicer synergy. Being able to regenerate target golem you control is actually pretty decent ability. If I can hit him with a 3/3, it's possible my opponent just doesn't have a creature that can block it without trading. And it isn't trading if I'm regenerating my guy just for 1 colorless mana. I like this guy a lot. Again, you want to draft the token generators before you draft other stuff in the populate strategy. This is one of these token generators that's good, right? Draft this guy pretty highly. Harmonize. 4 mana, draw 3 cards. Yeah, I think that's good. I've talked before about how I think this is going to be a slower format. I think Harmonize is a great card in a slower format where you're not sort of worried about dying all the time. This is like, I consider this a pretty good payoff for playing a Signet as well, right? You're not defending yourself very well with this card. You know, the Mog Flunkies will get a turn of attacking you. But after you play your ramp, getting to use this and grab more gas for your hand to play with your ramp cards, pretty strong. I like this a lot, and I value it even more highly once I have Avacyn's Pilgrims and Explorers and Sylvan Rangers and other stuff that's going to make sure that I ramp to that 4-drop slot, and then care about going beyond that, right? So I have the Arachnus Spinners and other stuff like this. Harmonize, very solid card. I'm going to pick this very highly, and then it's going to make me value even more all these ramp cards and signets and everything else that are in the set. So I want to say it's like a hard synergy, but it's a card that really works well with the other cards in a way that isn't like strictly what we're talking about when we talk about synergy, like with populate and tokens, where you like one thing just doesn't work if you don't have the tokens. This is a good standalone effect, but the two complement each other. Gore Clan Rampager, talked about this in red. Solid card, excellent. Draft it very highly. I mean, again, it's a 4-drop, and I want to get to 4-drop because I have signets in this set, and so if I can, I want to have a bunch of powerful 4-drops and a bunch of signets, and just start my game at basically turn 4, turn 2 signet, turn 3 4-drop, 4-drop, 4-drop every turn after that. I'm perfectly fine with this. This guy's great. Gruul War Chant. Again, I prefer Gaia's Anthem. I talked about this in the red set. Just like an extra point of mana is kind of bad. Menace is going to be decent, I think, for evasion. But like this is specifically a 2-color combination. Right, I have to be like green-red, some combination of the green-red archetypes, and I don't know. I just don't think this is. I'm almost just fine playing Gaia's Anthem and antheming my guys. I almost like that more, even if I was paying the same mana cost for these two. So, not super sold on this card, but it is pretty good in that Gruul go wide strategy, right? Where you just want to punch through those points of damage, and the menace is getting the evasion is going to be relevant, and having the extra attack is going to be relevant. Yeah, but again, you have to be an aggressive deck as well. It's not like Gaia's Anthem as well, where it's just creatures you control and you can play them on defense as well. Gruul War Chant, they have to be attacking creatures, right? So you really have to be Gruul to want to play Gruul War Chant. It's like the name says on the tin. You want to be Gruul before you use Gruul War Chant, and I'll pick it up in that strategy, but I won't pick it up very much in others, and in particular because I don't even like this in the Jund strategies, because in those I'm looking to really just like double down on sacrifices with Golgari Rotworm and like Golgari Germination, right? It's really just for Naya tokens and green red go wide, but it's good in those archetypes. It's just, again, I'm not willing to pick a card that locks me into 2 archetypes really early in a draft, and I'm hoping these things go late, right? That's the other thing that's going on, is like I don't want to pick it early first pack, and then the second and third pack, I'm hoping things like this go to me late, and I can let them wheel and instead pick up something else, right? Instead of having to pick this. So I'm going to let this pass a lot of the time. Bronzebeak Moa, I think this card's a beating. I think it's really strong. Again, it, like Gruul War Chant, it kind of locks you into some colors, but this is a much better payoff. I'm going to play this out off of a Signet, and then I'm going to next turn I'm going to put like Fists of Ironwood on it. I'm going to beat in for 8 damage, play other stuff as well. It's going to be such a beating. This is going to be, I think this card will just close out some games. There'll be some games where your opponent doesn't have removal for the Bronzebeak Moa, and they just straight up lose the game right off the bat. Baloth Cage Trap. So there's a lot of text here. If an opponent had an artifact enter the battlefield under his or her control this turn, you may pay 1 in green rather than pay the mana cost, and you create a 4/4 green beast creature token. I don't even care about this alternative text. I don't care. Now, in part, there are artifacts in the set, right? The Bant Splicers, all the Splicers are creating artifacts, and the Signets are there, right? So there is some upside to that, but I like this card just because I can pay 5 mana, instant speed, put a 4/4 token into play. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think you want the token creators before you want the populate. This is a 4/4 token creator. I want that. I don't care if if none of this extra text, if it was just 5 mana, instant speed, create a 4/4 beast creature token, I would play this. I want to emphasize that. I think this is a good rate on this card. At instant speed, creating a token, yes, I want this, right? This is the sort of thing my opponent is going to attack in. I'm going to surprise play this and have a blocker and eat their stuff. I think this card is solid. And then there are going to be some games where I keep up 2 mana, they play a Signet, and then I get a 4/4, and I start beating them in the face for 4, right? And suddenly, I have a 4/4. A lot of the cards that they can play to try and stabilize off of that, say, Penumbra Spider, this gets through that, right? It eats 3/3s. It eats one of the best commons in green. There actually aren't a lot of cards that really contest this. They're probably going to have to stack 2 creatures in front of it. Even just as a creature, even without any populate synergies, I like this a lot. I think that it'll catch people out a lot of the time. You'll decent number of the times, and when you play this card, you'll be able to play it for its 2 mana cost as opposed to its 5. And even when I play it for its 5, I'm going to be happy. This is a card I'm going to draft pretty highly. Urban Evolution. Harmonize was good because it was draw 3 cards for 4 mana. This is draw 3 cards for 5 mana, and then you get to play an additional land this turn. The big downside, of course, is that this is Bant, right? It's kind of weird that Bant is the color combination that's about ramp and has more of this ramp, but I do like the ramp. This is something that's going to ramp me out to bigger stuff. This is definitely one of these cards I'm going to pick up more highly when I am able to get that Crater Hoof Behemoth or something in pack 1, pick 1 or whatever. But I'm not going to draft this as highly as I do Harmonize because this is a very restrictive mana combination, right? I am Bant if I'm doing this. I could be splashing just one of the 2 colors, probably splashing the blue in this case because I think green is just there's more ramp in green, and if this is clearly part of a ramp strategy, then that's what I want to be doing. But Harmonize is more flexible. I could play this in any deck. I don't necessarily need to be ramp. Here I kind of need to care a little bit about ramp as well. In any case, because you're drawing 3 cards, you're more reliably going to be able to play an additional land this turn. But I don't know. I also just don't know how I think about ramp cards that cost 5 mana. Because again, like the highest cost cards we're seeing here, maybe Slime Molding counts, but like Arachnus Spinner is what I'm ramping to. I do want to have some payouts before I play this card. I definitely want to see some payouts before I ever draft this card over Harmonize. I want to see something that I'm going to do with 7 mana, right? Or something like this. Otherwise, it's just not super exciting. Being able to play an additional land on your turn is also a much less valuable effect on turn 5 when you're less likely to have those lands. Drawing 3 might get you to that land, but it might be possible that you don't have an extra land because you've been hitting your land drops on all the previous turns. You've used all the land in your hand. It's not like Explore, right, where you played Explore on turn 2, and yeah, you had a 3-lander in your opener, you had a 4-lander in your opener, you get to play an extra land pretty guaranteed. This time I might need to hit something off of those 3 cards. I might not be able to hit it. That could be hit or miss. So in combination with the fact that the ramp is probably a little bit less useful, it's a little bit more narrow of an effect. Like there's only certain decks that are going to care that much about it, right? Other decks are just going to be fine playing their land next turn, right? Because that's another thing too. I get to play an additional land this turn. That's really kind of only relevant if I'm doing something with the extra land that turn. Like maybe it came into play tapped, maybe that was the reason. But like, otherwise, if all I'm doing is playing the land I was going to play next turn, this turn, I might not be getting really much benefit out of playing Urban Evolution here. So I like Harmonize a lot more, much less restrictive on the mana cost. I like that it's 4 cost, which again is that magic number I feel where a lot of your mana curve is going to want to start if you're able to get signets going. Urban Evolution seems more specific. I'm still going to draft it reasonably highly, but I know I'm going to want to know that I'm at least green-white, right? And maybe I can splash the blue for Bant. And I'm going to want definitely things that I can ramp to. I'm going to want to have found an Arachnus Spinner or some other payoff card before I do this, because otherwise it's just not exciting. I'd much rather take a Harmonize. I'm going to pick Harmonize almost all. Like, it's going to be very rare, very, very rare that I draft Urban Evolution before I draft Harmonize. If I see these 2 in a pack, I'm almost always going to take the Harmonize first. And, yeah, I mean, that's the short of it. I also might just expect a card like this to wheel, right? Like, even if I didn't value Urban Evolution higher than Harmonize, I would take the Harmonize first because there's a good chance with this being a Bant card and being a very specific Bant card that I'm not going to... no one's going to pick it up at the table, right? So don't draft this card that highly. Draft it highly if you are in that strategy, I think, because it is going to be a solid card in that. But this is not a pack one, pick one type of thing at all. It's Bant, very specific part of what you're doing, like a small sub theme with ramping. You need to have ramp stuff. Yeah, I don't know. Long and short, it's a good card if you're specifically in that. It's a bad card otherwise. Pick things like Harmonize above it. Mystic Genesis. Mystic Genesis is kind of weird. The 2 blue is really bad because I want to be, if I'm creating tokens, I kind of want to be a base green white splashing blue, and splashing blue with double blue is going to be tricky. So I don't like this card a lot. I think this card is going to be very hard to fit into your deck. I think that it's forcing you specifically into Bant, and you've got to be Bant with like a base blue. I don't know about that. I mean, maybe this is like part of a 4-color good stuff deck where I'm green, white, blue, black, and this is like part of my instant speed stuff. I don't know. I don't like this card. The mana cost is restrictive in a bad way, and I know I've talked a lot about wanting to create ooze creature tokens, like big tokens, create the tokens before you populate. I'm not sold on this card though. Then finally we have Arachnus Spinner. I think as far as creatures go, this is going to be one of the biggest ones in the set. It's a 5/7 for 6. It's actually a decent rate in my book. The fact that it can fetch an Arachnus Web is also kind of relevant because it means that even if my opponent has 1-for-1 removal, if I'm able to just like tap this in response, fetch the Arachnus web down one of their creatures, at least I'm getting some value. We're trading card for card, but I'm even if he ends up having some relatively efficient answer for the Arachnus Web, right? At least I'm kind of getting some value here. But I think what I like most about this card is that there is this ramp sub-theme here. Avacyn's Pilgrim, Explore, Sylvan Ranger, Urban Evolution, Coiling Oracle. And yeah, I mean, I guess the short of it is just like 5/7 is a beater in this format. 5/7, it just dominates everything else. Like we don't really see any other bigger creatures. This kills everything else that we've seen except for like a slime molding, right? And even if you cast a slime molding for the same mana cost, the slime molding still loses to the Arachnus Spinner, right? You spend 6 mana on a slime molding, you get a 5/5. This is a 5/7 for 6 mana. I actually like this card a lot. It's difficult to first pick because I really do think that you need to be in this ramp strategy, but I'm willing to kind of gamble on that ramp strategy if I'm seeing this like 3rd, 4th pick, and I say, oh, you know, this guy's just this guy's kind of a bomb. They need single target removal to kill this, and even then, if I have an Arachnus Web, and I'm almost certainly going to be able to fetch at least one Arachnus Web, you know, this card's pretty good. So I like this. I like this card. It's specific to a kind of an unsupported, like, or a minor theme in green, but it works really well with that minor theme. So I'm going to pick it up decently highly. In any case, that's more or less all that's the rest of the cards here. I've reviewed the other ones. I guess to just kind of recap, I like Gideon's Lawkeeper a lot. I like Skyfisher. I think Lone Missionary is decent because you're just looking for 2-drops here. I'm not really big on Graceful Reprieve, Momentary Blink, Wake the Reflection, Soul Warden. Youthful Knight, kind of the same story as Lone Missionary. I like him just because he's a 2-drop, and I feel a little bit starved for 2-drops here. So I might pick this guy just to fill up my curve. Deputy of Acquittals, good in Blink. Sundering Growth, probably main deckable if you're green-white. Call of the Conclave is going to be your bread and butter for green-white. Attendant Knight, solid. Core Hookmaster, better in aggressive strategies. Pitfall Trap, you take this because you don't have a lot of removal in white. Rootborn Defenses, find the tokens first. This is a decent effect once you have the tokens to populate. Gift of Orzhova, don't like this. Talon Trooper, do like this. 2/3 flyer is a great body. Skynet Legionnaire, 2/2 flying haste, don't like it. Centaur Healer, it's a 3/3 for 3. It's solid. I'll probably get a decent number of these. I'm not going to draft it over Call of the Conclave. Eyes in the Skies, again, find the tokens first. Maybe this goes into Esper and some control strategies because you can play it at instant speed. But I think you do need, otherwise, some token that you plan on populating with this before you grab this. Same story with a lot of these populate cards. Find the token generators first, then pick these up later. This is going to be one of the better ones to pick up, though, after you found that. Aether Toe, I feel like you're hard up for removal. I'm going to take this below Pit Trap, but it's still solid removal, so I'm going to pick it up decently highly. Sensor Splicer, again, you want the tokens. This guy he makes golems. I kind of like this guy. I think hopefully you're going to be able to pick up this guy to shore up a lot of what you're trying to do. I would actually pick him a lot earlier than other people will because I think you want to get the tokens first again. Path to Exile, fantastic card. First pickable Intangible Virtue. Pretty high pick. Does really require you to find the tokens, but this is less, right? Finding these tokens is less of a restriction than finding the tokens you need for Populate. So this card is more universally good, even if it is kind of like Wake the Reflection. It's pretty dependent upon you finding that stuff, but I think you can find it here. It's a lot easier to find the 1/1 tokens, and that's the problem with Populate. You don't really want to be populating 1/1 tokens, which there are a decent number of. You want to be populating bigger stuff. You're going to have 1/1 tokens, though, so this is going to be good. Miss Meta Witch, don't really like this card. I think just the mana cost is high. It's a 2-mana 1/1. Sunhome Guild Mage, I don't like being stuck in Naya. I think if I am in Naya, this is a decent card, but I don't want to be stuck in a particular color combination. Don't like Thundersong Trumpeter. Same reasons, just as a worse card than Sunhome Guild Mage. I'd rather have a Gideon's Lawkeeper. Don't like this card a lot. Lingering Souls, fantastic card. Splash black so that eventually you can flash this back, but it doesn't need to be like a heavy splash. You can just have like 1 or 2 extra black sources to eventually get to this. Just a really good card. Flicker Wisp, great card, fantastic, fits in a lot of archetypes, draft this very highly. Wall of Denial, good in your Esper control decks, probably not much in everything else. Sin Collector, I like this in your Esper control list a lot. Hopefully this is just a card that comes to you late because it's white-black Esper, and a lot of people are going to undervalue it. I like having the effect of being able to choose, or being able to look at your opponent's hand, even if you're not getting to choose an instant or sorcery card and removing that. I think this effect is solid. Just being able to see my opponent's hand is going to tell me as an instant speed deck a lot about what I want to know about what I need to play around. Woolly Thoktar, all this stuff is good. These 3-color cards are really solid. They do what you want to do in that archetype. Unflinching Courage, not big on this. I don't like these auras. Too much instant speed removal, too much bounce, too much whatever. Wayfaring Temple, very big on this. Love it as a populate card. This is one of the populate cards I'm going to take before I find the tokens, because even if I don't find the tokens, I think this guy is going to be, even if this guy is just a 3/3 for 3 on a lot of turns, I think that's fine. And if he's generating more stuff, he can run away with the game pretty easily. Rock's Warmonk, again, 3-color creature, really strong. Pick these up if you can. Really incentivizes you to find the splashing. Master Splicer, this is basically first pickable. It's 5 power and toughness for 4 mana. You want to get good 4-drops to go along with your signets. This guy's fantastic, enables so many archetypes, picking up highly. Vanish into Memory, almost more of a sideboard card. I feel like you want to use this against your opponent as often as you use it on your own creatures, because just the other extra text on this card, you draw cards equal to that creature's power. At the beginning of the next upkeep, you discard cards equal to that creature's toughness when it comes back into play. You're going to want to bring this in against tokens, where it's just all upside because the creature never comes back into play. And you're going to want to bring it against like aggressive decks that have more power than toughness. But other than that, it's just not going to be good. I guess maybe this is a way of cashing out your own tokens, right? Like you could vanish into memory your own golem from a Master Splicer to just draw 4 cards. I don't know if I like a card that's like instant speed, kill your own 4/4, draw 4 cards. I'm not sure I'm really excited about that, but it does have that effect. So I don't know. I feel like this is a sideboard card, though, and it's going to be particularly strong against people with tokens that you want to blink out with this, or maybe like aggressive strategies where blanking the attack is useful and they have more power than toughness. But I don't know, complex card, I don't like it a whole lot. I almost think it's a sideboard card. It's really good in those situations, but I really don't know how often I'm going to play that, and it is putting me into 2 colors. Tower Gargoyle, 4/4 flyer is solid, really good. Again, like all the three color creatures, just really good. Bronzebeak Moa, I think this card is fantastic. It dies to a lot of removal, of course, but I think there are going to be a lot of games where your opponent just doesn't have an answer. Bronzebeak Moa kills them in a couple turns, and that's it. That's all she wrote. You put your Fists of Ironwood on this, and it just starts pummeling them to death, and they don't have an answer, so they lose. You'll just take free games, right? Like, they done same thing when they didn't have an answer to your Pack Rat in the Ravnica drafts. They don't have an answer for this. You play him on turn 4 off of a Signet, and he just wins the game. Agent of Masks, horrible card. I don't see the point of this. I don't want to be Esper playing this card. I don't want to be any deck playing this card. This could be 5 colorless. I wouldn't play this card. Banishing Stroke, you're hard up for removal. This is pretty good removal. I would take this. Yeah, I like this. Urbis Protector, more valuable because tokens are a thing. Green, Avacyn's Pilgrim, 1 mana ramper. Awesome, take it. Deathwood Cobra, it's filler, kind of like the Youthful Knight from White. It's a 2-drop. Druid's Deliverance, instant speed, 2 mana. I like that. Again, find the tokens first. Explore, there's a ramp sub-theme. I think this is a great card. At very minimum, it cycles itself. I like that. Fists of Ironwood, I think there's a lot of potential on this card. It's not like the other enchantments. I actually care about this. Just getting the 2/1. If I can avoid instant speed removal and just get the 2/1/1 green sapling tokens, this is going to be awesome. And again, there's going to be those Bronzebeak Moa games where you play something like a Signet on turn 2, you get your Bronzebeak Moa on turn 3, and then turn 4, you're putting like Fists of Ironwood and who knows, like an Attended Knight into play, and then suddenly you have like what, a 14/14 Trampler attacking them, and you've got a full board of other stuff. There are some ridiculous things that can happen with this. I think Trample's a relevant ability, and I just like putting tokens in green. I think this is going to be pretty strong. Revive, bad card, don't play it. Seal of Primordium, this is sideboard card, don't draft this highly. Strength in Numbers, this is a finisher. I would actually draft this pretty highly, and if you're in like green, red, go wide, or Naya tokens, I like this card. Obviously, it's more useful for attacking, because where you can kind of control the number of attacking creatures. You want to have a lot of attacking creatures before you're putting this card in your deck, but if you do, I think it's really good. Sylvan Ranger allows you to hit all those 3-color creatures that we talked about earlier. Just good ramp as well, for part of that sub-theme. I like fixing. I think having multiple colors, you're going to be rewarded for being able to fix in this format. This guy's solid. Works with Blink, works with a lot of stuff. Bounce it back with Core Skyfisher, yada, yada, yada. Burning Tree Emissary, one of the best commons in red and green. Ground Assault, good removal. I'm willing to splash one way or the other because, again, this is something I'm willing to play later when I have more lands. It's not like I have to have both green and red on turn 2, right? Sundering Growth, I think this is main deckable because there's enough artifacts and enchantments in combination, and the populate effect at instant speed I think is going to be really valuable. So I like to actually pick this up reasonably highly, at least more highly than you would normally take just a disenchant, which would normally go like 12th pick or something. I'm going to pick this like 8th pick, 9th pick pretty reliably. If I see this 8th pick, I'm going to be taking it, I think. Call the Conclave, grab these up, grab these up, grab these up, grab these up. They're what make the green-white deck work. You need them. If you're not finding them, I don't think you should be green-white. Someone else at the table is green-white, and you're not going to get there. Coiling Oracle, Bant, decent card. I don't like being forced into Bant, but this is a strong card, so if you're in Bant, yeah, pick this up. Arachnus Web, I don't like this card by itself. Works well with Arachnus Spinner. So much stuff just ruins this. It's like a 3-mana pacifism, and I don't even think pacifism would be good in this format, so yeah, you want the synergy with Arachnus Spider. You pick this up after you get the Arachnus Spider. I think you get these for free. Hungry Spriggan, great in green-red, go wide, great in, like, Naya aggressive strategies. You got to be aggressive, but he's a 4/4 trampler for 3. That's good payoff for being aggressive. Slaughterhorn, again, you want to be aggressive, but good card. Giant Baiting, again, you want to be aggressive, good cards. Centaur Healer, 3/3 for 3. I'll take it. Yeah, solid. Has an effect when it comes in the battlefield. That's nice. Penumbra Spider, probably one of the best green commons. This is definitely one I want to be ramping to in my 4-drop slot. Golgari Rotworm, decent in the Jund Sacrifice things, not relevant otherwise. Slime Molding, I actually like this card because I want to get the tokens, so I'm actually going to pick this a lot higher than other people will. Might of Old Krosa, decent in green-red, aggressive strats, not otherwise. Tattermunge Witch, same story. Thornscape Battle Mage, I kind of want to be Naya. I would accept this if I was green-red, and I could just pay this 4 mana, deal 2 damage to a creature. That's okay. But, I don't know, it locks me into colors. I like this card. I just want to be in those colors first. Gaia's Anthem, this is very high pick, very, very high pick. This is like, second, third, etc. pick. This effect is going to be good in a lot of different archetypes. I'm going to get it pretty highly. Golgari Germination, probably just as strong as Gaia's Anthem, but it does lock you into Jund. Hopefully you get these as the Jund player in like pack 3, late in pack 2, stuff like that. And you're just able to really shore up your deck with them. I think this is part of what makes that Jund sacrifice strategy. So grab these when you can. If you're not being able to get these, then maybe like this is your reward for being the only Jund drafter at the table. Putrefy, another reward for being the only Jund drafter at the table. Good in 4-color, good stuff. Payoff for being Jund. Spreading Thrynax, again, all these 3-color cards are great. They work in the archetypes that they're meant to work in. This guy's fantastic. Woolly Thoktar, same story. Already talked about Wayfaring Temple and Rock's Mormonk. Unflinching Courage, I don't like this. Talked about that before. Vital Splicer, I think this is great. It gives you the tokens, gives you Splicer synergy. The effect on this Splicer is reasonable. I like Regeneration. 4 power, 4 toughness across 2 bodies for 4 mana. Yeah, I want to ramp to 4 mana anyways. With Signets, this is going to be one of my 4 drops that I definitely prioritize. Pick this very highly. Harmonize, I'm going to pick this pretty highly. Works especially well with the ramp stuff that goes in here, so you want to be kind of base green, which is already kind of said by you having 2 green stuff here, but, you know, whatever. Harmonize, great card. Gorkline Rampager, great card. Again, 4 drops. I want to ramp into him. War Chant, good in Gruul, not good elsewhere. Bronzebeak Moa, a beating. I love this card. Baloth Cave Trap, great. I love this. I would play it even if it didn't have the extra text. If it was just 5 mana, create a 4/4 beast creature token. Urban Evolution, part of this ramp strategy. I want to find the stuff that I ramp to before I do this, before I like kind of lock myself into 3 colors as well, because this is a Bant card. You know, if I can play it, it's kind of like a Harmonize. I don't mind paying the 1 extra mana, you know, but I think it's just almost always going to be a lower pick than Harmonize. I'm hoping this wheels if I'm in Bant. Mystic Genesis, I don't really want to play this in Bant. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this card. I don't think it's very good. I wouldn't pick it very highly. Arachnus Spinner, I think this is one of your payoffs for ramping. This is what you get Arachnus Webs for after. I'm going to pick this reasonably highly if I know I can get ramp cards, especially if I play the format a bit and I know the ramp cards are going to go late. Arachnus Spinner even goes up even further. And there you have it, folks. All of the cards reviewed. We did red in another video. We did blue and black in another video. We did white and green in this video. I will be reviewing the rares and mythics as well. And talking about them, and probably also talking a little bit more about the specific archetypes. I've kind of talked a little bit about green-white here. I talked about blue-black in the other video, and I talked about sort of the base red, whether that was red-green, Jund, or red-black in the red video. I might talk about things like blue-white blink, right? Or maybe a little bit more about Esper Control or Bant Splicers as I talk about the rares. But the other videos are primarily going to be focused on talking about the rares and mythics and how they complement that. And I guess more or less which rares are the first pickable rares and which uncommons or commons I might pick over them, right? And really focused on that, because that's the main thing that you have to ask yourself whenever you're going to these drafts is this a rare that I pick over a great uncommon? Like, is this a rare that I pick over a card like Flicker Wisp or Path to Exile? Is this a rare that I'm going to pick over a Signet? Is this a rare that I'm going to pick over a Penumbra Spider? That's going to be sort of the threshold when we talk about rares. And whenever we see one of these rares that like doesn't meet that threshold, I'm probably just kind of going to gloss over them and say, if you can pick this late, pick it up late. But the rares that are really, I want to make that key distinguishing feature, like pack 1, pick 1, which cards are better, and how do the best uncommons and commons rate up against these rares. And that's going to be a lot of the focus rather than archetypes and so on and so forth. So there you have it. All the commons and uncommons from this set reviewed. I guess I am missing to some extent the tap lands and the signets and some of the artifact or colorless cards. But I've already talked a lot about them. I really do value fixing a lot in this format. I think it's going to be very strong. I think there's a lot of stuff like these Sprouting Thrynaxes, Woolly Thoktars, etc. that are really going to reward you for fixing. And I think signets are just one of the most powerful things you can do in the 2-drop slot. I really hope to draft decks where I just skip over drafting 2-drops and just go straight into playing my Penumbra Spiders, playing my good 3-color cards, my Rock Spore Monks and whatnot, playing my Gorkline Rampagers, grabbing more cards with Harmonize, etc., etc., etc. So that's going to be sort of my summary of that. Draft signets, draft them highly. I think they're going to be great. These are like, the signets are going to be things I think reliably you're going to want to pick up like 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th pick. And if they're going later than that, people are crazy. And there you have it, all in the video here. And then on a future day, we'll talk about the other cards.